Hey guys, qualification here. I'm doing a this is just like basically a one-shot kind of unique LP here of a game that I saw and then decided to make an LP of before watching anything more to do with it because of the nature of the game. And this game is called Hidden Agenda. It's an older game. I don't know exactly when it was released, but it's pretty old. And you have to obviously you have to use DOSBox to do that. So, um, see if I can do this right. What I'm doing now is just setting it up here. This game is kind of a political simulator sort of game. Yeah, 1988, I guess, where your goal is basically to run a country that has just undergone a revolution, and it's set in Central America, maybe South America somewhere. But I believe it's well, basically it's there to kind of describe a similar experience to Nicaragua or uh, Ecuador, Bolivia, those kind of countries that had these sorts of situations. And your goal is to just try and, well, you have whatever goal you want really, but you want to run the country for your term, which has, you're the president of the country, but you're not actually an elected official. You're just the head of a junta, and your power has been given to you for 3 years to basically set up the country so that they can start holding elections and things like that. So we're going to start the game, and our president is going to be Dirk Hammerfist La, or wait a minute, it's De Alva, sure. The second last name is like a Spanish thing, so actually I think this explains it. Yeah, second last name, it's the mother's maiden name or your husband's name preceded by De, so Dirk's husband. Okay. Alright, so here we go. A crowd of reporters presses towards you. Presidente Hammerfist, one calls. There has been much talk recently of the need for justice. Which of these would be most important to achieving a more just society? So right now what's happening is that the reporters are asking us questions, and this is basically as far, slightly, a little bit farther than this is where I have seen the game to before I stopped and just decided to LP it, basically. But right now they're asking us to set our own agenda, basically, and they'll ask us a couple questions. So, what's more important in a just society? Protecting citizens from violent repression, eliminating government corruption, or ensuring a free distribution of information. So I think probably the most important thing for a just society, obviously ensuring a free distribution of information is important, and so is all of these are important, but for the government in particular and for me as a president, what I should be doing is the second one, eliminating corruption, especially in this sort of phase where we're setting up the country. Another reporter pushes to the front and asks, everyone agrees that we must develop our nation's economy, but what should be the first priority of this development effort? So promoting the growth of the economy, oh, that's real, that's nice. Distributing the nation's wealth equitably or protecting the free movement of capital. Obviously this is a very clear divide between, left, right, and center. The free movement of capital is dangerous in this situation, no matter if you're if you're a libertarian or not. In this situation, since most of it, there's a bit of background that you can check up on that when you get this game. You have the manual and whatnot that you can look into, and it tells you more information. But basically, most of the wealth in this country is owned by a few families that have been set up by foreign powers, basically, and held all the land under the dictator. So that is not free movement of capital, and that's basically what we'd be doing if we pick this option is protecting their interests. Distributing the nation's wealth equitably is a very obvious leftist thing, which is I'm not in favor of that at all. It's just not a good idea, especially in this situation. Promoting the growth of the economy is just a cop-out answer, really, but it's the centrist one here, so that's what we're going to pick. And the third reporter raises his hand. Thank you, Presidente. One more question. Which of the following will the Hammerfist administration work hardest to improve? Infrastructure such as roads and utilities, services for the city dwellers, or living standards of the rural poor? These are all important, really. I mean, services for the city dwellers doesn't even come close to matching up against these other two. But again, the particular situation the country's in, I think infrastructure is the most important thing because that's how you get everything else done. And okay, it says, thank you, Presidente. We look forward to seeing you again after you have appointed the ministers of your cabinet. In the first year of your presidency, the harvest season ends, and the dry season begins. Wow, I have difficulty speaking there. So now we have to pick our cabinet, and to do that, we go to our contacts, and we pick the party dossiers. We have 4 positions to fill. Actually, let's see if we can see them. Yeah, we can fill the Agriculture Minister, Defense Minister, Internal Affairs Minister, and External Affairs Minister. So that's kind of like agriculture is kind of unique, especially for this country because it's so heavily based on agriculture. That's how most of the money it makes comes from. But that isn't really the Treasury Minister, or like our economic secretary or anything. That's just like agriculture is really important. So they have a particular minister for that. Defense, that's obvious. That's the military, another important one in this post-revolutionary situation. And they don't tell you it in like the game itself. You can infer it from the text. But the manual tells you how basically in this previous dictatorship that the country was under before you overthrew him, and his name was Farsante. Under the Farsante dictatorship, the military was with him pretty much to the end, but finally decided to split with the dictator, turned against him along with the rebel faction, the popular movement that had sprung into action against the dictator. So the army is now composed of the remnants of the Farsante Guard, basically, and the revolutionary army, and they're very straight down the line communist capitalists. So yeah, the Internal Affairs Minister, that person is basically in charge of everything that isn't what these other ministers do. They're like our Attorney General and Treasury Secretary and basically everything but the other ministers. That's what the Internal Affairs Minister handles. It's a very important job. And then the External Affairs Minister is our Secretary of State. They deal with other countries, and that's basically all they do. Okay, so we look at the party dossiers. Let's check out each one. So first up we have Christian Reform. Formed in the 1940s as a popular alternative, Christian Reform had its heyday during the short-lived reformist government of Leonard Flores, 1950 to 1954. Long the only tolerated opposition party, it managed to avoid banishment even during the worst of the dictator's successes. Its appeal is strongest among the small urban middle class, though it is also favored by elements of the coffee producers and the leadership of the Catholic Church. We'll go over the members in a second here, so go back to party dossiers. National Liberation, labeled an illegal criminal association by the dictatorship, the perseverance of the National Liberation Front is in the face of brutal repression, put it in the forefront of a revolutionary movement. Some National Liberation Party leaders consider themselves Marxists. For others, ideas about social change are inspired by interpretation of the Gospels known as liberation theology, and it speaks for the large population of the rural poor. And lastly, Popular Stability. Formed during the last years of the dictatorship by landowners and industrialists fed up with the self-aggrandizement of the ruling family, Popular Stability has its roots in the old conservative party of Emilio Rosario. The party is supported by these army leaders who did not flee with Farsante, the cotton-growing elite, and by many less privileged Americans whose fortunes nevertheless depend on these powerful interests. Oh yeah, the name of the country that we're in charge of is called Chimerica. Okay, so between the parties, basically we have, again, a centrist, leftist, and then rightist party. The Christian Reform are going to make up most of my cabinet, I think, because I don't want to, because of the role that I have been given as head of the junta here, is not to, impose some ideological agenda on the country. It's to set up the country and found it, basically. So to do that, we shouldn't try and cause controversy, really, but let's take a look at the people here. So first up, Ignacio Núñez Larrañaga. Christian Reform, the son of a well-known Poyes lawyer, earned degrees from the University of Mexico and the London School of Economics before entering politics. Gradually became more outspoken against the Farsante dictatorship, but strongly opposed attempting to solve the country's problems with violence. Nevertheless, endured several periods of house arrest and a long period in exile after receiving death threats. He's 43, and in several books he has authored, he has called for regaining the campesinos' trust through limited land reform, pragmatic recognition of the political power of the military, timely preparation for elections, and improving ties with neighbors in Europe. So he's a very neutral guy. Liliana Ortiz Lanza, or De Lanza, Christian Reform, a former teacher, mother of 4, and member of the board of trustees of several social service agencies. Widow of Armando Lanza, popular university professor, politician, and critic of Farsantes, whose assassination in the last year of the dictatorship helped spark the dictator's final fall from power. Still carries the banner of her outspoken and influential husband, but has now become an important figure in her own right. She's 47, and recent statements include her support for assistance to needy farmers, civilian control of the military, increased funding for education and healthcare, and stable relations with all countries. Again, very neutral, although it seems that she has more kind of a social justice thing going on with the needy farmers and the civilian control of the military than the other guy did. And lastly, Francisco Ferrante Oberon, Christian Reform, grew up in Poyet, family owns the Plumed Serpent Rum Distillery, opted to leave the family business to his brother and take a position with the party, regarded as the consummate behind-the-scenes player, preferring to work through others rather than seek the limelight himself, widely respected for his abilities as a negotiator. He's 52. When the dust settles, Ferrante is usually found on the side of measures to increase the production of export crops, careful balance of the two newly merged military forces, protection of the rights of individuals, and stronger relations with mating trading partners. I think this guy he has the right idea about how to set up the country, basically. There's several philosophies on how, and especially even on Latin America, and how countries would be able to grow most successfully economically and otherwise. And the real strategy that's worked is not the policy of kind of growing industry internally and trying to produce things for yourselves, but it's doing things with trade, focusing on exports, and really strengthening your ties to the international trade system, not trying to go it alone. That's why a lot of South American countries kind of failed. They went with that doctrine, while a lot of East Asian countries really took off because they focused on exports. So I kind of think he has the right idea, although this country isn't exactly prosperous anyways. Alright, so let's check out the National Liberation Party. National Liberation, daughter of a doctor, professor of sociology at the National University of Chimerica, published a book-length analysis of the Chimerican peasantry, contributing editor of the French Marxist journal Dialogue Dialectique, forced to go underground when university shut down by the Farsante Guard, and sub-commander of an important raid on Guardia headquarters, which gave her prominence in the growing revolt. She's 36, and in her articles and books, Jimenez has advocated forceful land reform aimed at helping the landless, bringing army officers guilty of human rights abuses to justice, increased attention to the health care needs of the poor, and closer relations with socialist nations. She's very obviously a radical leftist. Okay, next up, Julio Olivares Las Casas. National Liberation, grew up in a well-to-do family. Since taking his vows, has been a tireless advocate for the rights of the poor, gave refuge to the underground opposition during the insurrection, narrowly escaped arrest on numerous occasions. A well-known writer and exponent of liberation theology, after admonishment from the Vatican against direct involvement in political affairs, left the Society of Jesus in order to devote his full energies to the services of my people. He's 39. In his writings and sermons, he has called for sweeping land reform to help the poorest Chimericans help themselves, curbing the abuse of power of the military, a nationwide campaign to teach the poor to read, reducing dependency on larger nations. So he seems to be advocating, basically, he's a very social justice oriented guy, not really caring about the economy or, that kind of stuff. But I don't think he has the right mindset that we need in the founding of the country, and he doesn't really have a political air about him. National Liberation, this is Manuel Calderón Iglesias, commandant of the guerrilla forces, led several of the most important victories of the insurrection, moved to the capital at a young age from a rural village, became active in the resistance while still a teenager, jailed and tortured repeatedly by the Farsante dictatorship, including a 4-year stint in Teluco prison, known as one of the most level-headed and pragmatic of the revolutionary leaders. He's 34, and in clandestine radio addresses during the insurrection to topple Farsante, Commander Calderón called for sweeping land reform to share wealth and power with the poorest Chimericans, integration of the Revolutionary Army with progressive elements of the old army, promotion of a nationalist ideology, and non-alignment in foreign affairs. So Iglesias, he seems like a pretty smart guy, I think. Out of all of the National Liberation members, he's definitely the most suited to government. I'll keep an eye on him. And popular stability, Bernardo Whitmire Alvarado. Popular stability. With financial backing from his family, started the successful automobile import business. When the dictator's cousin insisted on becoming a partner in his enterprise, courageously, some say foolishly, objected. Subsequently forced out of business, after undergoing conversion to an evangelical Protestant sect, entered politics as a spokesman for free trade and individual liberties. He's 47, and in speeches and interviews he has spoken in favor of encouragement of investment in large-scale mechanized agricultural projects, use of the military to reestablish order, elimination of all restraints on trade and investment, and close ties with the United States and other Western nations. So this guy, he seems very much, he would have done fine under the dictator, I think, really. Popular stability. Among the more independent-minded of the current army generals, he grew up in a well-to-do, this is Antonio Alejos Espinales, grew up in a well-to-do family of coffee producers, trained long ago at West Point, in his younger days regarded as ablest field commander in the army. During the insurrection, he led a faction of the military that broke with Farsante at a crucial juncture, effectively sealing the dictator's fate. He's 56, and from statements made over the years, his priorities are believed to be modernization methods of export agriculture production, increased military preparedness through U.S. aid and training, elimination of governmental corruption, and maintenance of close ties to the United States. So, he seems like a very... he seems kind of like he's a puppet of the Americans, really. I mean, look at him. He wants to have backing from the U.S. because he's in the military. He'd benefit from that directly, and he wants to have closer ties to the U.S. so that he can have more power in our government. I don't think he's a good choice for anything. And lastly, Francisco Rosario Rosanes, scion of one of the wealthiest families of Chimerica, he has called for extensive holdings in cotton and cattle, grandson of Emilio Rosario, a long-ruling Presidente overthrown in the 1948 coup, outspoken, temperamental, and ambitious, eager to resume the family tradition of service and power. He's 38, and he's long advocated encouraging direct foreign investment in agriculture, strengthening the armed forces but without excessive foreign assistance, measures to stimulate industry, and maintenance of close ties to the United States. So he's very much... his plans are just bad, and he's bad. I mean, this guy would screw us on the agricultural front. The last thing we need to do to grow our country is give more land to the foreign powers, because that's not going to be benefiting us at all. It's just going to benefit him and basically the top 1% of this country. Let's see. The only thing he really has going for him is the strengthening the armed forces without excessive foreign assistance. So I guess he's kind of independent on that front. But I think the only reason he'd want to do that is so that no one from outside could overthrow his sort of power. So now we'll start getting to appoint people. Let's appoint our agriculture minister first. Out of these people, let's see. The campesinos, I think campesinos are like food producers, basically. They're like medium-sized food producers that don't make a lot of money. And they're like the primary small business in the country, basically. I think this guy's going to be our agriculture minister. He does have interesting views on the friggin' sort of external affairs front. I mean, in particular, he has a very good sort of idea about how we need to go about making friends, which is non-alignment, but in not just not making friends, which is what the other people who want non-alignment want to do, but instead going for Europe and other neighbors, because what making friends with Europe in the Cold War basically did is make you more immune to interference from the USSR and the USA, because neither of them were wanting to, well, in the first place, the USSR couldn't interfere with people that Europe liked because the USSR had the US backing everything that Europe wanted, basically. And because the US had to defend Europe against the USSR, they couldn't just storm around and demand everything they wanted of them. So they're the only thing we can go for as far as non-alignment. But as far as the economic policies go, I think he has, or rather agricultural policies, I think he has a good idea, because while it is important to do export-oriented growth, this is a situation where we don't really have anything after this revolution. The country was never wealthy to begin with, so we need to kind of get the basics before we actually start worrying about economic growth. We need to get things under control. So I'm going to point him to the agricultural ministry. And Liliana, she has assistance to needy farmers, civilian control of the military. I think I actually might appoint her. We'll make her defense minister, because the reason I do that, it seems odd because she's not even a military person, but the main thing is civilian control over the military. That's extremely important, especially given the military we have, which is composed of two very opposed, very radical factions. We need to have direct control over it. We can't let them do what they want. And lastly, Oberon, we're going to make him our external affairs minister, because he has the right idea about setting up trade relationships. And it doesn't matter how they're aligned, as long as they're making us money, really. People won't care. So now we have to pick between national liberation or the popular stability to pick an internal affairs minister, which again it's the most comprehensive but probably least actually important in terms of keeping hold on the country, because it's going to deal with things like human rights and healthcare and stuff like that. And I might appoint this guy to that because he seems to have a very strong social justice point of view. And that's kind of the main thing I want in an internal affairs minister, is someone who's going to worry about, his primary concern is his people. It's not ideology, it's not power, it's just making people's lives better, which is what we want in an internal affairs minister. So we have a bipartisan ministry consisting of all of the Christian Reformed Party members, or party leaders rather, and one of the National Liberation. So we're centrist, left-leaning, but that's to be expected, because honestly, all of the people in popular stability, all of them are out for themselves, and they aren't going to help me, and they're not going to help the country. They're just waiting for a chance to get their power secured and expanded. So let's take a look at the press digests. The date, year 1, week 0 of the dry season. This is from Chimerica Aura. And they seem to be kind of a more right-leaning newspaper, as you'll see. And very soon here, we're going to get into a situation where I no longer know what. That'll be like a blind playthrough from that point on, basically. The new Presidente faces a deteriorating economic situation, a splintered military, shortages of food, and a potential power vacuum, now that the strong hand of Farsante no longer guards the nation. Searching for historical parallels, one might best compare the current situation to the fall of the Haitian despot Baby Doc Duvalier in 1987. So it's apparently after 1987. I guess this takes place in 1988 because, that's when the game's made. The El Independiente. This is the more left, Independiente, actually. More left-leaning newspaper, rather. The date, year 1, week 0 of the dry season. Speculation centers today on thoughts and aspirations of one individual. In 1959, when Fidel Castro overthrew the Cuban dictator Batista, no one knew if he would turn out to be a true revolutionary or a weak-willed reformer. Today, no one can say with certainty what leadership the nation can expect from this Hammerfist. And then here's the Edition Mondiale. France and the World in France. This is a French newspaper that kind of reports on world affairs as well as our country. So they're the most neutral, most accurate sort of source that I can think of, really. I mean, they're not going to be lying for any real gain. And not since Juan José Arevalo returned from exile to lead Guatemala in 1944 after the fall of dictator Ubico has a civilian leader so little known come to play such a crucial role in the region's politics as Dirk Hammerfist de Alva does today. And USA Yesterday, obviously sort of a parody of USA Today. And they are obviously the American newspaper, so they're going to represent American interests. Streets of Poitiers, which is, I believe, our nation's capital, became one endless parade as enthusiastic crowds demonstrated their hopes for the future by honking horns, waving banners, and joyfully traipsing through the city. The spontaneous bursts of affection reminded an observer of the enthusiasm Corazon Aquino met once Fernando Marcos had finally left the Philippines. Okay, that's what they're talking about. Alright, so that's what the newspapers say. They're all just talking about how now we're in power, how they don't know how it's going to turn out. Let's take a look at our progress charts. So first off, military expenses, quite high. That's to be expected, though, since we just came out of that civil war, the revolution sort of situation. And it also includes losses due to warfare. It's not just our military budget spending. So we've lost or spent about like $150 million. And then military purchases and aid from the USA and USSR are basically at zero. Oh, and the USA supported the Farsante dictatorship. That's why they have a little bit and then it tapers off. They cut aid and then Farsante fell. That's basically what happened. Social spending. So we have healthcare kind of rising a little bit. Healthcare and education a little bit has gone up. Losses from food price subsidies, we don't have those apparently. And then expenditure for infrastructure is dropping. Infant mortality is on the rise, and we have a way higher infant mortality than America or Latin America. So that's not good. And land distribution. About a quarter of the land is held by the state. About the same amount is held by the small businesses and other private producers, and most of the land is held by the wealthiest 5%, and it's on the rise. Food crops. Percent of the population eating less than the UN standard nutritional requirements is almost 60%. That's pretty bad. And production of corn and beans has dropped since the Farsante dictatorship fell, but it's stabilized kind of right at the start of my term here. Export crops. The two main crops we have are coffee and cotton that are grown in this country to sell. And it looks like coffee production has kind of dropped a little bit, but it's stabilized, and it's not that valuable coming off of a recent spike. And cotton production has really dropped, but the price has the price has really dropped, but the production has more or less stayed the same. And hard currency earnings, Coffee's making us more money than cotton, as to be expected from the other graph. Currency reserves, it's dropped considerably from where Presidente had it. And our debt has increased, as to be expected. Loans and aid. Loans from international banks and institutions it's okay, I guess. And bilateral aid from places that are not the USSR and their alliance, and not the USA and their alliance, is kind of okay. So overall, our country's it's not in a good situation, but it's not doing too bad. It's surviving. So here's where we can now decide to enter consultations with our ministers, and you can pick an issue of what they want to do. Or you can enter encounters with people in the country and kind of deal with those issues. So I've seen like 2 encounters, and I don't know where we're going to start here. Let's think. Basically, the priority that we have right now, I think, is going to be getting down the food, the major food problems that have happened. And to do that, we should talk to the campesinos. Let's see where they're at. I do not see. There we go, the campesino. So we're encountering Ernesto Mendez in his bean fields in Trinidad province. 70% of Chimerican farmers own less than 5 hectares and grow 80% of the staple food crops of the Chimerican diet. Let's see his bio. Ernesto Mendez is a small-scale producer of food crops, including milk, corn, and beans. President of the Union of Campesinos of Chimerica, a weak and ineffective organization under Presidente, the UCC played little role in his overthrow, though many members gave guerrillas food and shelter. Alarcon now hopes to build the Union into a major force in Chimerican life. I think that's probably a good idea, because food crops are pretty important. Alright, under the dictator, the National Bank was never interested in making loans to us campesinos. Credit came from the men who bought the crops. They took all the profits, and each year the campesinos owed them more. If there's truly a revolution, that policy must change. His proposal is to make loans to scattered food producers the first priority of our National Bank. Let's see what our agriculture advisor, Ignacio, says. In deciding how to encourage the growth of our agricultural economy, we must consider our international reputation. Encouraging export producers is the best way to present Chimerica as a fiscally responsible member of the international community. Well, I'm inclined to agree with you, Ignacio, but I think that before we have to worry about economic prosperity and trade, we need to actually just worry about making sure that over 60% of our population isn't starving. So we are going to make loans to the campesinos. We're going to build support on them. They're one of the major political factions, actually. And Nunez frowns. When one is between the sword and the wall, one has little choice but to do as the sword commands. It shall be as you say, Presidente. Sorry, Ignacio, but we really don't have the choice to do what you want in that case. Let's talk to the rights activist. We're encountering Gloria Mendoza de Lerna, Mothers of the Disappeared. Estimates of the numbers of students, professors, labor leaders, and other disappeared and murdered Chimericans run to the thousands. Let's see her bio. The biography of Gloria Mendoza de Lerna, a Poye housewife whose daughter Emiliana, a university student, was abducted during the last year of the dictatorship and has not been seen since, has now taken up the search for her daughter, as well as hundreds of others who suffered a similar fate, through a pressure group called Mothers of the Disappeared. So they are obviously a very humanitarian organization. Mendoza speaks to the voice of quietly controlled fury. Presidente, it has been a year since the guard took my daughter away, and with my own ears I heard her screams as the van disappeared into the night. Since that moment my life is hell. Every night in my dreams she comes to me. Mother, she asks, does my murderer still walk the streets? Will the torturers ever be prosecuted, Presidente? Many have not even been arrested. Can you at least force them to say where they buried our children? I'm inclined to agree with her, so we'll see what her advisor has to say. Yeah, obviously, he agrees. When I think of their fallen brothers, I am overcome with sadness. So many of them disappeared without a trace, so many brave sisters brutally murdered. But when I hear some people say, all this must be forgotten, the murderers must be set free, in their memory I burn with rage. I'm going to agree to the proposal. Mendoza bows her head and stands silent for a moment, as if praying. Then she looks up, eyes moist. As it says in the Bible, how beautiful upon the mountains are the feet of him that bringeth good tidings, that publisheth peace. And Julio says, if a revolution truly serves the people, Julio says, it will remind us of those crosses that we ought to bear, but find it convenient to ignore. And it's good to see you taking up our responsibilities with such an even hand. Oh, I got a message from the U.S. Ambassador, Bufford. I am pleased to report that my government has decided to resume shipments of military aid to the Chimerican army. Arrangements are presently being made with Colonel Horatio Ehrlich. I don't know if I didn't sign off on military aid. I don't know how I feel about that. We're going to go see the U.S. Ambassador. And we're encountering Eloquent and Bufford. Aid from the USA may involve generous funding and technical assistance for various development projects, AID. Depending on the recipient country's strategic situation, it may also include training for police forces and direct allocations of currency to the Treasury, ESF. So basically, the way this works, and this is what the State Department does, a major part of it, as well as the CIA actually, is they sign off in two ways, as it says there, aid or ESF. And the goal of aid is basically to help non-state actors, to give power to those people for one reason or another, usually to keep the government in line, to cause trouble for them, or to keep their policies from going in a certain direction, or to make them go in a certain direction, or to help economic interests in the country. That's the main purpose of aid. Aside from the humanitarian kind of aspects. And ESF, the main purpose of that is, as you see there, police forces and giving money to the Treasury. That's upholding unpopular regimes. That's making sure that those people can stay in power when the majority of the country doesn't want them in power. It's training their police forces how to handle riot situations and in some cases, training death squads and things like that. It's not great, but it's what the U.S. does. It's what every country would do in their situation. So, Bufford's biography. Newly appointed the ambassador of the United States to Chimerica, graduated of Georgetown University. Career Foreign Service officer, worked for many years as a political officer. Chimerica is his third post as ambassadorial rank after 2-year stints in Liberia and Laos. So this guy did what basically I want to do, which is be a political officer at an embassy or consulate, and I'd like to be an ambassador one day. That'd be really cool, but that's more of a political than skill-based position. So all right, let's see what he wants to do. We are pleased, the ambassador says warmly, to be able to offer development assistance to your nation. This assistance will be earmarked for private enterprises only, I should point out. All associated goods and services must, of course, be of American origin. Though we start off in a limited way, the potential exists for expansion. We look forward to seeing what direction your new government chooses to take. He wants us to accept North American offers of development assistance. So it says North American. I guess that includes Canada, but we're negotiating with the U.S. I don't know how that works exactly. And Oberon wants us to do the same thing. The timely development aid is offered by the United States will help us get back on our feet after so many years of the dictator's mismanagement. Even though I know there's strings attached with this aid, and essentially it's going to come in the form of loans that we're not going to be able to pay back right now, and it'd be very questionable if we can pay them back over the long term. But for my junta's purposes, keeping power, this is going to be useful. It's going to give us improved relations with the United States as well. And since we're in Central America, that's very important. Then it is agreed, Bufford says with a firm handshake, Chimerica and the USA shall be partners in progress. Our unique reservoir of experienced engineers, scientists, and agribusiness managers will be at your disposal. That's another thing that's going to be useful. People with technical skills don't exist in this country, really. I mean, you have a few highly educated individuals, but most of them would have been brain drained away into the United States, probably, and European countries, and maybe like Brazil and Argentina. But very few of them would have stayed in Chimerica, and those that did come back for the revolution have political reasons to do so, most likely, and that's going to be kind of a hassle to deal with in its own right. So Oberon says, he smiles with approval, to cross a river you must be willing to get your pants wet. It is time to start waiting, Presidente. That's a pretty accurate analogy, I'd say. I mean, to get to the other side here, to get to prosperity, we need to do a few unsavory things, which in this case is accepting that aid. So now we have an immediate attention issue. Streets of Poitiers, which again I believe is the capital, thousands of urban residents, both workers and unemployed, marched through the streets of the capital, protesting skyrocketing food prices. Union organizer Hector Ferreira Contreras is among them. Okay. Hector Ferreras tucks his hard hat under his arm and strides forward. Presidente, the situation is intolerable. The same beans that last week cost 1 chimera today cost 5. Workers with good jobs can barely afford to pay the family grocery bill. And what about the really poor, the ones with no jobs at all? They cannot even afford corn and beans. Something must be done. So he wants us to institute price controls for basic foods. And our advisor, Nunez Ignacio, his idea is to issue warnings about the dangers of hoarding and speculation and call for calm. He says, the disruptions of the past year have created some food shortages, but rumors have been blown way out of proportion. People hear that the supply of sugar may run out, so they rush out and buy as much sugar as they can find. This means, of course, that the supply of sugar does in fact run out. Things will calm down soon. Well, you might be right, Ignacio, but the simple fact is that even if it is a speculative crisis, the crisis exists, so we can't just ignore it. And we have to do something. I think price controls are going to have to be done, especially given how many people, the volume of our country that goes without food. Ferreira grips your hand and squeezes it tightly. Well done, Presidente. When the poor judge a revolution, they weigh their plates of beans. By this decision, you help bring them to your side. And Nunez nods. The overthrow of the dictator was not our most difficult task. The most difficult task lies ahead. We must build a bright future on a shadowed, underdeveloped past. That's true. Okay, so we've talked to a few people. Let's go talk to the army colonel, because I know he's got that ambassador said he's got aid for him. So this is Horatio Ehrlich Mercado El Condor Battalion, soldiers of Crack Rapid Response Group of National Reconciliation Army of Chimerica, the INRAC. Alright, so biography of Horatio Ehrlich Mercado, colonel, charismatic rising star of younger generation of army officers. When Presidente sought to increase control of the military, Ehrlich balked, considered the action an affront to the army's honor, joined the Alejos breakaway faction as the insurrection intensified, threatening to get out of hand. So this guy wants power for himself. That's basically what that means. He wants to have control and wants to make the army a very big part of our country's politics, which is what I don't want. Colonel Ehrlich welcomes you briskly and proceeds to make his case. It takes work and discipline and experience to run an army, yet there are those who would cast aside the voices of experience and reason and listen to young idealists who know only how to destroy. He fixes you with a penetrating stare. To succeed will require that we be given a free hand. Do you understand me? I completely disagree, Horatio. I completely disagree with you. Our decisions, this is Liliana, our decisions of late have served to increase the influence of the Subcomandante Correa. If the army is truly to be one of reconciliation, his joint chief must be empowered at the same degree. Technically, you're right, Liliana. We have given more political prestige to the revolutionaries by, going after people that are giving power to people that supported them. But honestly, it's not. I don't agree that he's right about this. I think, no, you know what? We're just going to refuse. We're going to reject. The colonel stands motionless, as if expecting something more. Very well, he finally says, but you are playing it with a snake, Excellency. Be careful. If the snake bites you, there is no remedy at the pharmacy. He wheels about sharply and strides away, somehow forgetting to salute you. That which is done hastily is wept over slowly, but let's not forget to return to the matter once we have had time to reflect. Okay, so that's not good, what just happened there. Because that sort of imbalance happened, we're going to go talk to the Subcomandante, try to rectify it, or maybe at least give him the authority to do something about Ehrlich if something steps out of hand. Okay, so this is Gabriel Correa Fernandez. The United States Army, having severed ties with the Chimerican Army 6 months previous to the insurrection, has now resumed shipment of military aid. Biography of Correa. He is subcommandante in the guerrilla forces and now the army, an active opponent of the dictatorship since his university days. Upon going underground quickly, he earned a reputation as one of the most able commanders in the guerrilla field commanders, or the guerrilla field commanders. He resisted the merger of the two armies until offered the post of Joint Chief of Staff. Okay. He says, "You must be aware, Presidente, that the United States has begun sending military equipment directly to the faction of our army controlled by Colonel Ehrlich. This direct tie between our counterpart and a powerful foreign country seriously undermines my authority. His proposal is to assert the authority of the Presidente to decide what aid Chimerica receives." Again, I'm inclined to agree with him because it is, it's actually kind of standard policy. Anytime the United States has an ally, they don't really talk with the civilian government about military affairs, especially not if it's someone that the United States kind of has in its sphere of influence. And while that is to the great benefit of the United States and kind of using that military effectively against whatever enemies they might have, and even sort of to the defense of the country for the same reasons, it's actually really bad for the civilian government because that is a blow to their legitimacy. And it's going to make it more difficult to keep the army under control, basically. Let's see what our advisor thinks. Yeah, she agrees with him. "It is important," your minister says firmly, "to establish the principle of civilian control over the military. We should be happy to accept aid from the United States or the weapons, advisors, or training for our troops. This decision, however, should not be made by the army chiefs in consultation with the U.S. ambassador, but by the President of Chimerica." Again, yeah, she's right. This is going to make the United States kind of upset, I imagine. But we got to do it. Comandante Correa nods. "We must protect the revolution at all costs," he says with determination. "Here no one surrenders. Our enemies shall not pass." Oh wow, okay, Gandalf. Chimerica needs more of this way of thinking, Presidente Ortiz says graciously. "It will be a pleasure to carry this matter onward. The ambassador of the United States urgently requests that you allow him to visit you on a matter of state importance." He's probably going to try to get me to change my mind. Yep. "Why was it thought necessary," the ambassador asked sharply, "to alter the traditional and professional relationship between our two militaries? The decision to interpose the office of the Presidente in a purely military matter has provoked a certain degree of wariness, especially in the Pentagon. Do you really want me to decline military assistance completely? Honestly, I think that we don't need your assistance. We're not fighting any wars. We have an adequate defense force. But more importantly, yeah, we do mean to question that relationship between the militaries. It's not professional, it's political." And she says, "If the choice is to accept military aid or the terms the U.S. offers or to receive no aid at all, we must swallow our pride. We might request that the civilian authorities at least be consulted." I don't know if that's actually going to allow us to do so. Her proposal is different. It's allow the United States to deal directly with the Chimerican military. And his is a return to the traditional arrangement. So maybe it won't return to the traditional arrangement. But honestly, we can't make the U.S. angry. That's going to be bad if we do that. I guess we'll go ahead and do so. Because whether it's going to be about, allowing the U.S. to have more political power in our country and allowing the army to have a bigger say in our country, or basically making them an enemy, we got to go with the former over the latter. They're a major influence over us either way. And we'd rather have them kind of doing this, incentivizing unfortunate powers in our country than bullying us directly. That would be a major pain. "We are pleased, Excellency, that your advisors have proposed a path of responsibility and peace. We look forward to seeing if that is in fact the path you take." Ortiz nods with approval. "A wise choice, Presidente, very much in keeping with our recommendations. We will go forward with renewed confidence." Okay, well, we did kind of have to go back on a decision we made, but the major thing I wanted to do there, actually, is to strip the colonel of his authority. And even though we did have to go back on a decision, we did manage to make him submit to our direction. So that's important. So we've talked to a lot of people here. Let's see if we can consult with one of our advisors, see if they have any issues that they want to do. Let's see. Ignacio, he wants to do a number of issues. I don't know if I'm really interested in any of those. Our defense minister is interested in corruption. I am interested in dealing with that. Julio wants to deal with death squads and human rights. That's pretty important. And the External Affairs Minister, control of marketing of exports, aid from socialist countries, and corruption. So let's see about control of marketing of exports. Large export producers already have enough clout to get good terms when they sell to transnational exporters. But what about all the small producers, especially of coffee? They don't have enough leverage. We propose an alternative, a voluntary manual national marketing board to compete with private marketers, buying crops at the same floating prices offered to the larger firms. And he wants to establish the National Marketing Board to aid smaller export producers. Let's see what other people think. We'll get detailed advice. Whoops. Okay, I guess I just agreed to his position. Well, I did actually think that is the right thing to do, but I'll explain why now. The National Marketing Board, it's important because small business doesn't exist in this country, really. I mean, it exists, but it has no power to do anything. And reversing that is absolutely critical to getting well, actually, it's not important for EOG, really. It's not important for export-oriented growth, but it's important for getting the country stable and for allowing us to have any kind of political authority. Because the main people we want to appeal to are not the massive cotton producers who are failing and doing nothing, but they have all the money. It's the coffee producers who are smaller, who are living in poorer regions and who make up a larger percentage of the population. It's them and the campesinos that are going to have more actual importance. Politically speaking, they don't have a lot of voice, but they have a lot of clout, if that makes sense. So we got to appeal to them. Let's talk to our defense minister about nationalism, popular organizations, and democracy. Our generation has a historic opportunity to finally forge democracy in Chimerica. I recommend the immediate formation of a tripartisan election council charged with writing a new constitution and preparing for the elections. So she wants to appoint a tripartisan council to write constitution and prepare for the elections. Sounds like a good idea to me. Let's see, the only other party member we have here, I imagine the other two are going to be the same. The only other party member we have is him. Okay, so he wants to do something different. Ordinary Chimericans have been without power for so long they scarcely believe such a thing as democracy is possible. Our party has made a start with popular democratic organizations. We form groups among women, in the workplace, among youth, dealing with people like themselves. People grow accustomed to democratic decision-making. We should fully support these associations. One of the dictator's palaces, for example, should be turned into a headquarters of the League of Women. He wants to build democracy from the grassroots by empowering popular democratic organizations. Well, you know, Julio, I don't think you're great on social justice, but you just don't understand the situation we're in, frankly. You don't understand the country that we live in. Let's get detailed advice from the defense minister. I'm going to agree with Liana. She's right. The tripartisan council, it's not going to be perfectly suited to democracy, but it's going to be able to get work done, really. And that's what we need. Chimerica needs more of this way of thinking, Presidente, or as he says graciously, it will be a pleasure to carry this matter onward. And that's the first season done. In the first year of her presidency, the dry season ends and the rainy season begins. So, let's take a look at the newspapers that have built up. So first off, we have an article from the El Independiente about the campesinos. The campesinos greeted the historic change in national bank priorities, the jubilation. As Father Julio Olivares once wrote, "The last must be first, and the first last. It is time for the meek to inherit, if not the entire earth, at least the blood-soaked soil of Chimerica." Well, you know, that's not really why I did it, Julio. I did it because people are starving to death. That's kind of an issue that we need to be worrying about, making more food. And El Independiente says, though the Presidente has not asked for military aid, the U.S. in its wisdom has decided to send it anyway. Is Chimerica a child to be treated so? Will the Presidente permit this to continue? Well, indeed I have, but I had put a stop to it first and heard the U.S. out. They had to come to me. I won out in the end, I think. And State Department spokesman Onret announced that the U.S. would soon resume shipments of military aid to Chimerica, which had been suspended a year ago. We hope this will help to stabilize a still very tense situation. That's exactly the opposite of what it did, America. We don't need military aid, frankly. It's not necessary. Chimerica ahora. Sooner or later, the food producers will suffer the most from these price controls. When the campesinos who grow our corn and beans can't make enough money selling their crops to make farming worthwhile, what will the government do then? Well, I tell you, the campesinos are going to be benefiting from these extended credit that's been given them by the National Bank, which means that they aren't going to have to worry about subsistence farming anymore. They can actually expand. So I don't think price controls are really going to matter. They're stimulating the business because people can actually buy food instead of it just sitting in stockpiles, which is what was happening previously. And lastly, the El Independiente says the country cannot afford to continue using foreign currency to buy corn and beans from abroad. We must boost our own production of the food we eat. Price controls by themselves, however, are not likely to result in higher food production. On the contrary, yeah, you're right, they're not likely to result in higher food production, but they're likely to result in higher food consumption, which is necessary to keep people from starving. It's going to stimulate the economy. I wouldn't worry about it. Okay, and check the graph, see if we've had any. We got a little bit more aid from the U.S., and our military expenses are going down. That's good. Social spending, losses from food price subsidies are starting to come in, but that's fine. I expected that. We're going to lose a little bit of money on it, but it's worth it. And expenditures for infrastructure have stabilized, and so have the healthcare and whatnot. Infant mortality is on the rise still. Land distribution, we're going to deal with that issue pretty soon. Food crops. The percent that's starving has gone down. That's good. Production of food has slightly gone down, but relative to the number of people who are now able to eat, it's much better. Export crops. Let's just look at this instead. Cotton is continuing to decline. Coffee has stabilized. We have less money in the National Bank. That's to be expected, and we owe more. And we are receiving more aid. Yep, these things are all known to us. Let's go have an encounter with the IMF. So, we're encountering Alice Beetle Sourwine. Decisions made by the International Monetary Fund, often called the lender of last resort, will decisively influence the choices other international financial institutions make about whether to extend loans to any given country. And Alice herself has been a representative of the IMF, a British economist trained at the London School of Economics, spent several years on the faculty of the University of Chicago, and then briefly served in the conservative government of Margaret Thatcher before joining the IMF. So she's part of the austerity regime, basically. She's part of the Chicago school. I mean, that's very obvious. That's what she is. She's a monetarist, hardcore. The new government of Chimerica faces many difficulties, but also many opportunities, Sourwine says encouragingly. I'm pleased to report that we have approved a package of loans designed to stimulate production of your primary export crops. And she wants us to accept a package of loans from the IMF and international banks. And he wants basically the same thing. The confidence of the international financial institutions shown in our new government is gratifying. We must hasten to take advantage of their offers of assistance. So we have two different choices here. We can accept their version or negotiate the rescheduling of debts and secure further loans. So Oberon has a better idea because what he's doing is pushing back our payments on the debt we already have. And she just wants us to take on more debt. And obviously he's better to choose here. But overall, the IMF at this point in time, in the 80s, even through now pretty much, the IMF has been an organization that's been ruled by monetarists, and its ideas have always been about making governments pay very heavily for the money that they get. And the reason it's that way is because the IMF is the lender of last resort. It's where you go when you have no one else to go to, but then again, when the countries get to that point, the last thing that they need is austerity. And yeah, Oberon will take loans. It'll be a pleasure, Sourwine says, the practice warmth, to be of some assistance in the economic recovery of your nation. And Ferrante says to cross, waiting, river, etc. Ooh, we got another immediate action here. Mothers have disappeared. Hundreds of women dressed in black march through the streets of the capital carrying large crosses and banners reading, "Where are our children?" Spokesman for the mothers is Senora Gloria Mendoza Lerma. Whoops. Okay, good. Let's see. The Guardia murderers have been released, Mendoza says with indignation. Not one has yet been prosecuted. Is there nobody with the strength and courage to make sure these criminals are punished? So we can put the Farsante Guard torturers back in prison, or arrest the members of the defeated Farsante Guard. This will be a great test of our faith, Father Julio said with strong emotion. Many noble young men and women were tortured, beaten, kept in isolation cells for months at a time, with no light, no contact with others, and barely enough food to stay alive. As Christians, we must not demand an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, but we must not permit the wicked to go unpunished. So she wants to put them straight back into prison without any kind of trials. He wants to arrest them. I think Julio is right. They do deserve trials eventually, but we can't just go around putting people in prison because they're a threat to us and because they have done terrible things. We got to give them due process. Still, she's gonna like it. So yeah, same thing from her. And he is saying, "We have taken up our cross," Father Julio says, satisfaction. "Now let us carry it and work to find some way to lighten the burden of those many crosses we have forced on others." And now we've got thousands of laborers stream in front of from the countryside to fill up the square in front of the National Palace, chanting, "Give us land now." Claudio Aguilar speaks for the Land Now movement. So, we've heard much talk about reform of the land. This made us happy, at long last justice. But what has come of this? My Presidente, the process is so slow, and we cannot wait forever. The land, salted with the sweat of our ancestors, belongs to those who have worked it for so long. We are tired of promises. We demand only what is rightfully ours. His proposal is to announce plans to give power and wealth to the poor through a land reform program. Well, we do have a lot of state land that we're sitting on that's just not being productive. We are going to do land reform, but I don't think the way that we need to go about it is just giving it to poor people. We need to give it to people who are going to make use of it. Let's see what Ignacio says. "To the people of the countryside grow restless. Too many poor families have barely land enough to grow corn and beans to feed themselves. Many more have no land at all. They look with envy at their neighbors and bosses, some of whom own vast estates of thousands of hectares of unused land. The voices demanding change grow louder and louder. We have no choice but break up some of the largest estates." Ignacio, you're right, but I'm not going to agree with Claudio here because I don't want to just throw it to poor people like it's friggin' bait or, bread and circuses, basically. What we need to do here is be smart about it and use the land in a way that's going to be productive because that's what actually benefits people. It's not just giving them things. So he's still going to like it. A smile comes to Aguilar's weather-worn face. "My Presidente, your words fall on my ears like the first rains on the earth at the end of the dry season. We will pray for you." "Once again, you have chosen well," Nunez says with measured enthusiasm. "We will use all means at our disposal to attain our policy objectives." Well, that's that is some political doublespeak right there. That means nothing. That just means we're going to do what we need to do what we want. Okay, let's do another consultation. The shortages of food. That's a major issue. Let's talk about that. So the fabled generosity of revolutionaries is catching up with this. We can no longer afford to subsidize our consumers so lavishly. We've been selling corn, beans, and other staples for less than we paid for them. And who has been paying for the trucks to bring these products to the market, to dry them, store them, and package them, and administer the whole process? We have. We simply cannot afford to do this any longer. So everyone wants to eliminate price controls but our internal affairs minister. Let's see what he has to say. "Our price controls have had effects we did not intend," your minister says ruefully. "Suppose a campesino rents a mule to bring his corn to market. The price of mules is not regulated, but the price of corn is. When he sells his corn at the official price, he may not get enough money to rent the mule again to ride home. Why should he bother to put seeds in the ground? We're going to have to subsidize the cost of producing basic foods." So here's kind of an issue that's very contentious, and those are food subsidies. Now, in the U.S., they're basically just a political thing. They're not useful to production. But in this country, in a country where it's 50%, over 50% of the population isn't getting basic nutrition, I would say that food subsidies are probably a good idea. It's a good way to spend the government's money. So we are going to indeed subsidize the production of foods. Ortiz stiffens and closes her eyes for a moment while she absorbs this news. Very well, she says after a time. We will do our best. Yeah, sorry, I know that's not exactly what you guys wanted, but, I mean, we can't just go around turning our back on every decision. That's not being centrist. That's just being a flip-flop. Okay. He wants to talk about education and healthcare as well as death squads and human rights. See about this guy. Okay, international relations. Let's talk about international relations. So, a resolution condemning the racist system of apartheid has come before the United Nations. The resolution calls for a halt to South African efforts to undermine its neighbor, the Bokota African Republic. Chimerica stands firmly for the principles of majority rule and national sovereignty. So yeah, this is apartheid's still going on when this game came out, actually. It's a current event for them. Everyone agrees. We're going to vote for this resolution. I agree. We're going to do it, so let's do it. Ferrante gives a slight bow. Be assured, Presidente, that loyal officials of our ministry will warmly welcome the news of this decision. So that was just kind of a decision. That didn't really do anything with us. Let's talk about corruption. The Ferrante bureaucracy was like a river infested with piranha fish. Everyone demanded his own little bites before anything could ever get done. But what was left after they all took just one little bite? Nothing but bones. Let's see what everyone else has to say. Defense Minister, okay, they all want to totally rebuild, it looks like. Yeah, totally rebuild. What do you say? Internal Affairs? Totally rebuild. Everyone agrees. I guess we're going to totally rebuild the bureaucracy. And yeah, pants wet. Strikes in several Poyet's factories quickly escalate into a general strike against most industrial employers. Union leader Hector Ferreira acts as a spokesman for the strikers. Under the dictator, Ferreira says of the feeling, to organize a union was not a struggle, it was always a battle. If his downfall is to mean anything to us workers, we must have full freedom to defend our rights. Wages are so low, it is hard for many to even put tortillas on the table. Guarantee unions the right to organize and strike. That seems like an obvious one. Yeah, we're definitely doing that. When the trace of a smile appears on Ferreira's lips and quickly fades away. These words are good to hear, Presidente. We understand them well, but before we can get too excited, we must see if the men from the ministry understand them as well. If a revolution truly serves the people, Julio says, it will remind us of the crosses we ought to bear, but find it inconvenient to ignore. Yeah, heard that one before. So we've been extremely leftist so far. We need to balance ourselves, or we're going to run into problems. Let's talk to... let's talk to the coffee grower. Jesus Cabarales Murillo, racks of drying coffee to Tobacco province. Chimerica's chief export, rivaled by cotton only since the 1950s. Grown in hilly areas, much is still exported as raw beans, though efforts have been made to increase the amount of processing done in-country. Alright, so Jesus Murillo is the owner of a medium-sized coffee finca in mountainous Vallecillo province, inheriting these 3 hectares from his father. After 40 years of hard work, built a 40-hectare operation complete with a processing beneficio. Chief of Chicafe, the Coffee Growers Association, which speaks largely for owners of smaller farms. Let's talk to this guy. Presidente, sometimes a farmer can run a government, but a government should not try to run a farm. The lands a dictator stole should quickly return to private hands. When I was a young man, I had very little land. It was so difficult. There were times if just a few more of my trees caught the coffee rot, I would have seen my children begging in the street. There are many coffee producers who struggle now just as I struggled then. We can make their lives easier and our country more productive at the same time. He wants us to give the dictator's land to less well-off coffee producers. And so does our internal affairs minister. He says, managing the Farsante estates as state-owned properties is a terrible idea. Without an owner putting in longer hours worrying about the success of his business, no one has the incentive to run such farms efficiently. Coffee can be best produced on small, medium-sized farms. We recommend a gradual policy of privatization with emphasis on enlarging the size of existing small farms. I completely agree. That's the right way to go. As far as land reform, we give it to these guys and to the campesinos. We keep it out of the hands of the landless people, keep it out of the hands of the cotton people, and out of the major firms. This is what we need. Cabrales nods and smiles. A good choice. Put your trust in those who have earned it. As they say, a bird in the hand is worth 100 flying birds. I don't know about that. I think it's a bird in the hand is worth 2 in the bush, I think. That's what the saying is. But I don't know about 100 flying birds. Whatever. We will follow your leadership in this matter with unreserved enthusiasm. Workers seized land throughout the cotton-producing districts, provoking violent clashes with the owners. Thousands massed before the palace, demanding immediate title to seized land. And Claudio Aguilar speaks of the Land Now movement. So cotton producers are they're bad. I don't know why we are producing cotton. Cotton's not profitable. We shouldn't be doing that. Anyways, the time for waiting is over, Aguilar says, waving his hand before you can speak. Once I had a deaf old mule. To make her notice me, I had to make much noise, beat her with a stick, and move my arms like a madman. That is why we are here below the windows of your palace, Presidente Mule. Oh, that's not very nice. You're insulting me right out of the gate. He wants us to grant title immediately to land seized by the poor. I don't think that's a good idea. Like I just said, don't give it to people just because they're poor. That's not helpful. And Nunez says, impatient peasants have seized land belonging to large landowners throughout the cotton-growing districts. This cannot continue. Allowing anyone who wants land to seize it would mean chaos. If we don't put a halt to this illegal seizure now, everyone will suffer. Completely agree. We'll do a land reform program, but we're not going to do one based on friggin', populism and wild, emotional stuff. And do it based on efficiency. A smile comes to Aguilar's weather-worn face. My Presidente, your words fall in my ears like the first rains on the earth at the end of the dry season. We will pray for you. So he likes it, even though it's not what he wanted. Once again, you have chosen well, Nunez says with measured enthusiasm. We will use all means at our disposal to attain our policy objectives. Another nonsense doublespeak there. In the first year of your presidency, the rainy season ends and the harvest season begins. Let's take a look at the newspapers. What do we got? No sooner was the notorious murderer Robert Blowtorch Bob Padilla arrested than his cronies in the army managed to get him released, claiming there was insufficient evidence to prosecute. The new government seems to be taking on some of the worst characteristics of the old. Well, hey, I didn't do that. I put him back in jail, so... And Chimerica Iora says, details of the new land reform program have yet to be announced. May the forces of reason and moderation prevail over the foolish passions that seem to have swept through the capital like a hurricane. Yeah, you guys are just stooges. A glorious new epoch begins. With the announcement of its intention to promote land reform, the revolutionary government took a bold step towards a future bright with promise. Technically we're a revolutionary government. Technically we're a junta, but we're not communists. We're just friggin'... Oh boy. The Marxist true believers seem to think that since Jesus could multiply loaves and fishes, their God will do the same for them. For the rest of us, it is clear that these subsidies will produce no miracles. What the subsidies will do is spend a lot of government money. I'll give you that. It's not going to make the IMF happy, but screw them. We're getting loans. We're not going to do austerity. What we need is people to eat. Okay, and caught between the interests of urban poor and the interests of the rural poor, the government initially chose to favor the former. Stirred into action by the recent protests, however, the government has attempted to redress the balance by offering campesinos the guaranteed price of their crops. Well, yeah, I did that already. I subsidized them after giving them food controls. I never gave support to the city because the cities are... This country has no industry. It won't have industry for a long time. We have no skilled people. We have no capital at all. What we have are export crops and food crops, and that's it. So we're not going to worry about industry. Is there nothing sacred in this land of folly? The government, in its wisdom, will decide which ignorant peasants may despoil the land of other men. Can it be long before the government tells us when to plant our crops, what brand of rum to drink, what color pants to wear on Tuesdays? Oh, these guys are just ridiculous. We're initiating land reform, and yeah, we're breaking up some of the friggin' massive 4,000 hectare estates so that people can actually use the land efficiently. I'm sorry, whatever. I think it is actually, reasonable to let the government decide who gets what here because they are going to have experts, especially since the U.S. gave us agricultural experts. That's bad on them. Western diplomats await with interest the government's response to leftist provocations. Observers agree that if the government caves in and allows illegal land seizures, its ability to maintain security will seriously be put in question. Oh, the U.S. is upset because their exporters or their little allies, and the big families are getting screwed over by this. Not even that bad. Let's take a look at the land distribution. State-owned land's going down. The private businesses is going up. That's what we want to see. The 5% is still going up, unfortunately, but, we can't do anything about that at the moment. There's just no way to solve it. All right, military expenses continue to decline. The U.S. aid continues to increase. That's just what we want to see. Social spending, we're losing food price subsidy money. Continue to do that. We're spending more on that now than we're doing on healthcare. But again, if we just consider this as, like our friggin' national food budget, I think that's okay. That we're spending more on feeding the vast majority of our people than we are on, education and healthcare, which we're going to increase actually. So we're going to spend a lot of money, and we don't have any money, but that's just what's going to have to work. Let's see, where's our, is it infant mortality? No, that's stable. Latin America and the Caribbean are rising. Ours is fine. I mean, it's extremely high. It's not fine, but it's not, really bad. What am I looking for here? Military expenses, social spending, infant mortality, land distribution, food crops. Okay, here we go. Yes, okay, finally, we're below the 50% mark on the people who are eating less than the UN standard. That's good. So now at least half of our population is properly fed. So yeah, I think it's worth spending the extra money on that. Alright, let's go see if we can secure some more aid. Let's talk to the USSR. Economic aid from the USSR may consist of oil, machinery at concessionary rates, trade credits, and technical assistance. Hard currency in short supply in the USSR itself is rarely offered. So they do the opposite of the US. They don't throw cash at their problems. They basically just give people stuff that they make. And it's not very good stuff. It's really crappy. USSR did not produce good machinery, like, ever. And the stuff they gave to other countries is really, really bad. So, I mean, they'll give us really crappy stuff. But the biography of Vladimir Razumov, ambassador of the USSR to several Central American countries, resides in a neighboring country, but his posting includes Chimerica, seasoned diplomat whose previous postings have included Yugoslavia, Mexico, and the Sudan. This guy seems like he's pretty much interested in making us into another kind of revolutionary example, trying to set us up as a counterbalance to U.S. influence, trying to weaken them here. I doubt he's going to be of much use, but we'll talk to him all the same. As the leading socialist nation in the world, Ambassador Razumov offers, we will be happy to assist the new Chimerica in whatever ways we can. We can offer generous loan terms of the latest design and agricultural equipment direct from the Ukraine. We will be happy to make available agronomists and other technical advisors, as well as military equipment if you so desire. All of those things sound bad to me, honestly, but we'll see if they can do anything. Okay, so here's Francisco. He has a better idea. We cannot afford to refuse economic aid from any source willing to offer it, I agree. Ideally, we would ask for hard currency to buy replacement parts or equipment we already have. Second best would be new machinery on good terms. We've always used technology from the USA, though. If we start getting things from countries with different technical standards, we'll end up with a lot of compatibility problems. We should definitely draw the line at military aid. Like it or not, the USA dominates this region. We cannot afford to offend Washington. Completely agree, although I kind of disagree about the whole compatibility issues. The USSR stuff isn't going to last long enough for us to make... It's going to break down, like within a month, basically. And all it really serves to do is make them give us stuff that we won't have to spend extra money on repairing our current stuff. We'll just let their crap break down in our fields. Let us drink to the success of the Chimerican Revolution, Razumov says with satisfaction. The peoples of the Soviet Union and Chimerica are comrades in arms in the common struggle. Their friendship is firm. Ferrante gives a slight bow. Be assured, Presidente, that the loyal officials of our ministry will warmly welcome the news of this decision. Mothers have disappeared, and we have another one of these. Hundreds of women dressed in black march through the streets of the capital, carrying large crosses and banners reading, "Where are our children?" And we're talking to Senora Gloria again. And these guys have got out again? My goodness. The friends of the Guardia murderers have set them free, Mendoza says angrily. The jackal Padilla, who used to burn our children's feet with torches and throw their bodies from the heights of cliffs. Freed. How can this be? Help us, Presidente. We ask only for justice. And yeah, again, we're gonna do the same thing we did last time here. And they're gonna do the same thing that they did. Okay. So, let's talk to some of our advisors. I'm going to see if we can knock out corruption. That'll be one expenditure we can reasonably deal with. The United States says it has enough evidence to convict the Chimerican army officer of drug dealing. They request permission to extradite him. This is, of course, a very serious matter, but extradition as one of our citizens goes against our current laws. Let them bring charges here in Chimerica. If the accusations are true, the accused and his associates will be court-martialed and punished. But we must not give Chimericans over to the justice of strangers. So his advice is to prosecute officers accused of drug dealing here in Chimerica. Everyone else thinks that he should be allowed to be extradited. Personally, I don't have a problem with extraditing him. I mean, on the one hand, we'll see what this guy has to say. The obscenely profitable drug trade has distorted the political situation of many countries in the region. We begin to see its effects here. The U.S. asks that we allow them to extradite the Army officer accused of transshipping cocaine. The U.S. is better equipped to deal with firmly with criminals with such powerful connections. Honestly, I think that's a good idea. If we, on the one hand, yeah, we're going to violate our own laws. It does kind of interfere in our sovereignty. But on the other hand, that's going to make us the U.S. like us, which is really important. And more importantly, well, not more importantly, but probably of equal importance is messing with cartels, making a stand against them. Personally, that's a bad idea. We want to let the U.S. do that. If we give our government the protection of the U.S., like on their war on drugs, that means that we don't have to worry about cartels coming and messing with us because the U.S. will protect us against them. So we're going to allow them to be extradited, even though it is against our current laws. I don't care. We can change the laws. We should change the laws. Allow for extradition because it makes sense, honestly. It's better for us as a country to do this. As you choose, Olivares says after a pause, but think of the people, Presidente. They may wonder, as John the Baptist wonders, are you the one who is to come, or do we wait for another? Well, I'm the leader of the junta. I'm not your Presidente. You didn't even elect me. I'm here to set up the country. I'm not here to do whatever I want to do. And from our defense minister, angered by your decision to allow the extradition of a Chimerican citizen, mobs destroyed an annex building of the U.S. Embassy today. We have managed to contain the violence. You know what? That's the U.S.'s problem. They get to deal with that. You know, they wanted to do it, so they get to deal with the consequences. Just because I agreed with them doesn't mean that I think that they're completely right in doing so. Okay, so we can deal with healthcare and education. If we talk to him, shortages of food, still talk about that. But they're going to want us to remove price controls, so that's not going to happen. Let's talk about credit for agricultural producers. I'm afraid our generosity is wasted on people unable to repay their loans. Some campesinos work with such poor soil that anything spent on it is a waste of good chimeras. Others live so far away that they'll never be able to get their crops to market. Though the idea of funding food producers may have some humanitarian appeal, export crops are still better bet. At this point, we are over the margin now. We're going to keep the subsidies in place, but we're going to start giving the loan priority back to our export producers, because that's how we actually get the money to pay for the subsidies in the first place. I'll agree with you, Ignacio. All right, let's talk about the disposition of the dictator's estates. Our program to help the small coffee growers is a popular success. Once a farmer has enough land, he can take advantage of more sophisticated technology, especially if we use some of the proceeds from the sales to give them technical advice. Studies have shown that the kind of medium-sized family farm we support is, in the production of coffee at least, the optimum unit for maximum production. So yeah, that's kind of, the coffee producers in this country, and to some extent the campesinos, are kind of like the middle class, but they're not really. The actual middle class lives in the cities, but those guys are so small and so economically unproductive that they just don't matter. So effectively, we have the three classes in this country as the uber elite, massive land holding farmers that are primarily in cotton, that are part of like the noble families. Those guys have a lot of the money. They have the most money. They're the wealthy elite. Then we have in the middle, we have the campesinos and the coffee growers. And then at the bottom are the more rural campesinos. Although realistically, they're not even campesinos. They're just subsistence farmers. The industrial workers that we have. We have quite a lot of industrial workers given the low impact of our industry. And then lastly, we have the people who are hired on the larger plantations that are in the working for the cotton producers primarily, and in some senses the coffee as well. So I mean, I think we're doing the best thing here by protecting, and promoting the middle class. That's how you get stability. It's not by going one direction. The overthrow of the dictator was not our most difficult task. The most difficult task lies ahead. Yep. All right, let's see if we can get something about nationalism. Oh, okay. Attacks on land reform beneficiaries. This is a big deal. Our land reform program has provoked a certain amount of violence between the different groups affected. It was for this reason that we deployed our army to oversee the process. There have been reports of questionable authenticity that members of the armed forces have themselves at sometimes overstepped their authority. This suggests a need for better discipline in the ranks. Our troops need training in how to manage civilians without resorting to violence. He wants to direct Colonel Ehrlich to improve troop discipline. I disagree. He's a bad guy. He's out to get me. He's not going to be... I imagine he's probably not going to be too supportive of land reform to begin with, and I imagine that any kind of the unquestionable or the questionable conduct that's happening is happening under his authority. So I disagree. I don't really have a good decision on this one, honestly, but we'll talk to the Internal Affairs Minister, see what he has to say. We give the poor land with the left hand and kill them with the right. Many soldiers in the new army have not forgotten the ways of the old. At the urging of the landlords, they drive the members of the cooperatives off their new land. To set an example, hundreds have been tortured and killed. We must give the farmers the means to defend themselves. Distribute arms to the farmers given land by the land reform. This is a bad idea too, frankly. We shouldn't be just giving guns to people that we gave land to. That's oh goodness, this is not a good situation to be in. But I know Ehrlich he's not going to be a good guy. I mean, look at him. He's just, everything he's doing. He's taken direct aid from the United States. He's the guy that's been behind, he's the leader of the former Presidente forces, and he only turned to the revolution whenever it was about to collapse, basically, whenever he was out to save his own skin. So that guy is not someone to trust. I'm going to go ahead, even though I don't like it, I'm going to give arms to the rural poor. If our government is to succeed, we must be ready to compromise. We will defer to your judgment in this matter, with the understanding that other times you will choose to heed our advice. No, I do heed your advice sometimes, so you're right. Okay, what do we got here? Corruption, I would like to deal with that. Education, we got to start dealing something with education and the other stuff. Control of the army. Nationalism, popular organizations. Let's talk about control of the army. Our decisions of late have served to increase the influence of Subcomandante Correa. If the army is truly to be one of reconciliation, the Joint Chiefs must be empowered to the same degree. Yeah, if we want to keep the army together, we have to let him do something. I don't like the guy. I know he's definitely not a good influence. And Correa is actually, though. He is actually a good influence. He is legitimately trying to help people, and he's legitimately protecting the government. But I don't want the army to fracture, basically. So we need to give him some leeway. And since he's the one that since Ehrlich is the one that is more about his own personal status and power and whatnot, I think this might appease him if we give him the ability to do what he needs to kind of balance out against Correa. Because we're going to be, politically speaking, Correa is going to see all of the benefits, basically. Ortiz nods with approval. A wise choice, Presidente, very much in keeping with our recommendations. Yeah. Let's talk about nationalism, popular organizations, and democracy. In many neighboring countries, local mayors are selected by city councils. The councils, in turn, are elected by the people. I ask you to lend your support to adopting this idea in our new constitution. My advice, support indirect election of mayors through election of city councils. Well, that's not even how we do it in the United States. That seems a little bit... I mean, it is some places, but usually the mayors are directly elected. This is kind of more... I guess it could be more, technocratic, sort of. And the other guy wants to do barrio defense committees. I guess we can see what he has to say. The Electoral Council is debating the forms of local government. We urge you to lend your support to decentralized local administration, focusing on the neighborhood associations called barrio defense committees. To give these groups some power, make them the ones to appoint and remove mayors. That's a bad idea. That reminds me a lot of Daniel Ortega and his I forget their name. They're basically the same thing as this, though. They're things they're populist organizations that are used to curry favor with the rural poor, so that they can support the government. Basically, they're not there because they give people more democratic ability and whatnot. They don't. They strip them of that because they only work at the local level, and they're kind of basically bullies. A good comparison would be like the boss system in the United States. That's kind of what those are. So we're going to go ahead and talk to our defense minister. I'll support indirect election of mayors through election of city councils. So city councils are elected by the people, and then the councils elect the mayor. I guess that makes sense. Councils are going to be performing the more direct roles anyways. That's sort of a parliamentary solution, but whatever. Once again, you've chosen well, Nunez says, with measured enthusiasm. We'll use all means at disposal to attain our policy objectives. And is there something we can do about corruption? I just want to see if anyone has any more before we go back on the encounters. Okay, good. Let's talk about corruption. Who makes the most of the money here in Chimerica? The large export producers, the foreign-owned exporters, the speculators. Who paid most of the taxes under the Presidente tax code? The small, unorganized coffee farmers. It is time to distribute the burden fairly. Revise the tax code to make the rich pay their full share. Let's see what everyone agrees. Everyone agrees, so we're going to do that. I also agree. Ferrante smiles in approval. To cross a river, you must be willing to get your pants wet. Yeah. Second year of your presidency, the harvest season ends and the dry season begins. Let's take a look at the newspapers and the reports, but first newspapers. The date, year 1, week 0 of the harvest season begins. If the educational exchange agreement goes as planned, 1,000 Cuban elementary teachers and 40 university professors will spend the next year in Chimerica. At the same time, 700 lucky students will win scholarships to Cuban universities. Apparently, the Presidente refused military aid, though this also has been reportedly been offered by our international friends. A curious decision considering the many dangers that face us. Honestly, military aid is not important to me. I think that we have more than adequate defenses, and the U.S. has already given us aid. Plus, getting aid from the USSR in that fashion is dangerous, so I'm not doing it. But the major benefit, I think, of this arrangement is indeed the educational part, because the crap they're giving us just sucks. That's just the truth. It's bad. I would not... The USSR's tractors and stuff that they're going to give us, they're going to break down. They're going to be worthless. But the educational stuff, that's really useful to us, actually. Even though they're not going to receive the best education at Cuban universities or, in the USSR if they offer the same deal, they are going to get skills that they can't get right now under us. Even if we increase education, most of our people aren't literate, so that's kind of a problem. We're not going to have a skilled workforce in the near future, but one thing we can do is expand the literate populace's, education, basically. So the people who already have some education can get much better off, giving us very high-skilled workers that are necessary, basically, for us to engage in EOG. That's the long-term goal. And now, the big question about the drug scandal is, how high in the Army hierarchy will it reach? Even some of Colonel Ehrlich's friends are involved, it is whispered. Oh, so now Ehrlich's involved in the drug trade. That's good. I mean, this guy is he's bad news. USA yesterday. It is now clear that the highly placed officers of the Chimerican Army have been transshipping drugs to the U.S. through an airstrip with a military base in the mountains. Well, okay, I gave you guys the ability I extradited them to you. Chimerica Aura. The violent reaction of the students to news of the extradition decision was a predictable response to the abject violation of Chimerican law. Are you serious? You guys don't care. You guys love the United States. There's no reason for you to oppose my decision to extradite him, really, unless you are benefiting from the drug trade, which I wouldn't doubt, really, actually. Okay, next. Year 1, week 4 of the harvest season. For hours, the army did nothing to keep the crowd from pelting the embassy with stones and attempting to roll burning tires through its gates. At times, in fact, those soldiers sent to the scene seemed to encourage rather than discourage the attacks. Well, whatever. If the military wants to be antagonistic towards the U.S., as long as it doesn't actually reflect badly on my government, let them. Whatever. And embassy officials expressed astonishment at violent reaction to the extradition of an acknowledged criminal. I kind of agree with that. The U.S. is right here. There's no reason to be extraordinarily upset. The guy's a known drug trafficker, and that's bad for us. We don't want to deal with that, frankly. That's bad for us to try and handle on our own. And torn apart from within, the land reform program bleeds like the war victim it has become. The dogs of war have still not been chained. They chew on the marrow of the people. In La Pintada, the soldiers used the new sign of Cooperativa La Rosa for target practice, laughing as they shot it so full of holes that it fell in splinters to the ground. That's kind of just, that's Ehrlich's people, definitely. But that's just a jerk thing to do. Why would they, that's so stupid. Like, that's not enjoyable to do. And this is your country that you're supposed to be protecting. I mean, it's kind of a minor thing to talk about, but honestly, that annoys me that they would do that. And maybe they're just the drug trafficking friggin' mercenaries that Ehrlich has, but whatever. The Reconciliation Army continues to operate like two separate fiefdoms that have signed a temporary truce. In those parts of the countryside controlled by the traditional army elements, it acts more like the mercenary bands of a medieval warlord than a national force. Well, there you go. I mean, geez. I don't know why we agreed to this setup in the first place. The only reason I'm maintaining it is because I don't want to deal with the chaos that's going to erupt if I don't. I mean, the victory against them was basically assured, so it's stupid to deal with it now. And Army spokesman sharply disputed claims that uniformed personnel engaged in repression of land reform beneficiaries. We are there to help and protect them, said Colonel Horatio Ehrlich. Oh, yeah. Completely. That's just total BS. Whatever. Military expenses continue to decline. USA continues to rise. Food price subsidies are the major expenditure now. We're going to cut back on them, I think, but infant mortality, that's stable again. Land distribution, this is most of the state land is being distributed to private people, which is what I want, not the wealthiest 5%. It's stupid for them to get more land. It's really dumb. It's just why? Why would we do that? Why are we selling it to them? Okay, yeah, we're doing great on this. We're doing real great. Export crops, production, honestly, even though we don't have the credit stuff going on, coffee production's doing fine. I think that might do it because we balanced it out with land reform. But our preference over coffee and cotton to food crops at the National Bank, our credit preferences, they didn't really affect the production of coffee. And coffee's what actually makes money. Friggin' cotton's so worthless. I mean, okay, look at that. Nice, we're making money. That's good. I don't know how we're doing it. I mean, we're spending a lot of money. Whatever. Owns and aid. Oh, it might be because of the USSR and Cuba and whatnot. They're giving us aid now too. So what we're gonna do is go to let's see. Let's talk with the shopkeeper. This is she's so irrelevant to our economy. Her opinions are bad. They're wrong, basically, as far as our government policies go. But we're going to see what she has to say anyways. Encountering Esmeralda Monzon de Osorio, Occidental Market Poyes, largest market in Chimerica, a sprawling complex of large market buildings and open-air stalls. Over 10,000 vendors, mostly self-employed, poor women. And Esmeralda is the owner of a licensed market stall at the Western Market in Poyes. Yeah, okay. Largest marketplace in the country. Something long sold out everywhere else will usually still be available at the Occidental at a price. Okay. Let's talk to her. Yeah. Monzon gives you a story or a sharp glance, once-over glance, as if deciding whether or not she'd risk selling you groceries on credit. I don't like the smell of it, she says slowly. The government buys corn to the campesinos at one price, then sells it to the corn to us at a much lower price so we can give the people at the bargain. Some say if the government wants to lose money, okay, as long as we can make a profit. But I don't know. It smells to me like there's a great big fish in the middle of all that corn, and pretty soon that fish is going to start to stink. But lady, I just looked at the budget, okay, and we're making money. So our currency reserves are going up. We're spending money on food stuff, but the government's there to spend money. That's what we do. I mean, sorry if that upsets you. Let's see what our advisor says. Oh, he wants to do this because he never agreed with it in the first place. And yeah, he wants us to abolish price controls and subsidies. I disagree. It's working, lady. It's not harming us. Monzon reaches out and snatches your wrist as if she's just caught you filching a tomato. You have a lot to learn, Presidente, she says, shaking your arm furiously. People will try to buy low and sell high, whatever you say. Try to force them to do otherwise is complete foolishness. Well, lady, look, you're not getting anything on the bad end here. You're getting them at lower prices, right? I mean, yeah, you're selling them at lower prices, but you're making a profit still. So what do you have to complain? The only people supposedly not turning a profit on this deal are us. We're the ones spending money, the government. So, and we are making a profit ultimately, so it's okay. Another one of these, and we're gonna send them to prison again. Okay. Yeah. Ambassador of the U.S. wants to speak to us. For some time, rebels seeking to overthrow the government of one of your neighbors have made Chimerica their headquarters. In addition, elements of your army have been supplying these Marxist rebels with military equipment. My information points to the direct involvement of your subcommandant Correa. This interference in the affairs of sovereign nations, strictly prohibited by various treaties, must cease at once. He wants us to cease aid to Marxist rebels and deny them permission to reside in Chimerica. I agree with him, actually. We cannot afford to, this is what Oberon says, we cannot afford to risk angering the United States unnecessarily. Our position is just too precarious. All military aid to others must immediately cease. Though we cannot forget that many of our present leaders spent periods in active exile, we had best ask these rebels to move their political base to a country in a better position to offer sanctuary. I don't want them going anywhere else. That's a bad idea. We're going to go with what the U.S. says here. We are pleased, Excellency, that your advisors have proposed a path of responsibility and peace. We look forward to seeing if that is in fact the path you take. And be assured, Presidente, the loyal officials warmly welcome your decision. Yep. Alright, let's talk to some people we haven't talked to. Let's talk to the guard leader. Encountering Roberto Padilla Pasquale. Oh, this is the guy that did the blowtorch on the children's feet and threw them off cliffs. That's real great. Oh, so he's in prison. Oh, that's good at least. Let's talk to him. These are unclean times, Presidente, Padilla says with an angry grimace of distaste. Many contaminates muddy the waters of our fatherland. Communists, reformers, and many types of subversives. But faced with such dangers, who does your government put in jail? The humble sewermen, the volunteers who offer to plunge it into the heart of filth and disinfect it for you. When the rats run loose, you have forgotten to untie the cat. Your first analogy was, honestly, why would you make that one if you have something like much more pleasant, I mean, you're calling yourself a sewer man. That's gross. And then you could say you're a cat. I mean, it's much better. Just order the release of soldiers accused of politically motivated violence. Let's check what our advisor says. Well, yeah, I think we're going to do that. We must be very careful with how we go about dealing with the military and paramilitary forces. We have sent a strong signal that the excesses of the past will no longer be tolerated. That should keep them in check. To push them further, however, would for the time be too risky. Wants to leave further handling of the accused to the military courts. Let's do it. Yeah, that's what the military courts are there for. Major Padilla takes a long drag from his cigarette, drops the butt, and crushes it under his heel. He holds the smoke in a long time. Okay, he finally says with a blast of smoke. Anything you say, Presidente. You are still Presidente, aren't you? Chimerica needs more of this way of thinking, Presidente. Yeah, whatever. Okay. Let's talk to the teacher. Encountering Leticia Arsordia de Granados. Open-air school in Tabaco province. Total students at the time of insurrection, 501,000. Population of the student age, 5 to 18, 1,360,000. Number of teachers, 12,706. Okay, that's a pretty bad setup right there. Biography of Leticia Azurdia de Granados, President of the Federation of Chimerican Educators, an organization branded as subversive by Farsante, formerly Dean of National University in Poitiers. Also active in the League of Chimerican Women, a popular organization associated with the National Liberation Party. Let's continue with this encounter. Presidente, half the population of our nation cannot read. Fewer still can even write their names. But is this so surprising when vast areas of our countryside contain no teachers and no schools at all? For too long we have neglected the needs of our children. We must establish schools and hire teachers to build our country's future. Let us begin at once. She wants us to increase funding to education. So does our social justice guy. Your minister looks at you studiously. Why was it that Farsante spent so little on education? Because the less people know, the more easily they will believe the lies they're told. Teaching someone to read gives them power the dictator didn't want them to have. But to teach the people to read costs money, for books, for pencils, for the teachers, salaries. Such an expense is a necessary investment in our nation's future. I agree with both of you. We're going to do education funding. Well done, Presidente. Senora Asordia beams, as if she'd not actually expected you to come up with the correct answer. In the long term, education is the best investment a nation can make. The children of our children will remember. If a revolution truly serves the people, Julio says, it will remind us of those crosses that we ought to bear, but find it convenient to ignore. Message from Horatio Ehrlich, Joint Chief of Staff. Over a year has gone by since the disintegration of the Farsante Guard. In that time, the courts have been unable to produce clear evidence of crimes allegedly committed by the former Guard members. The spectacle of repeated arrests, disruptive administration, and release has gone on long enough. In interest of harmony, I have today declared an unconditional amnesty for all those accused of politically motivated violence. You know what, Ehrlich? You just overstepped your bounds, bro. You're done, okay? We're putting him back in jail right now. First thing we do. Whoops, not the bishop, the rights activist. We're going to put him straight back in, so screw you, man. Presidente, the nightmare has returned, Mendoza says, fear and desperation in her voice. Already, 2 of my closest friends among the mothers have been killed. We found Dorotia's body outside the city at a place they call the Door of the Devil. Her face was beaten in, and the vultures had their fill, but still I could tell it was my friend. In the name of God, please help us. Yep, Olympia's getting outlawed. I guess that's like the organization of these friggin' death squad guys. Dismiss high-ranking all-military officers to protect the death squads. Yep, this is the death squads. So, boom. Mendoza bows her head and stands silent for a moment as if praying. Then she looks up, eyes moist. Yep. Soldiers protesting the dismissal of Horatio Ehrlich. Really? Did I dismiss him? Set up barricades around the Campo de Julio military school, calling on all patriotic Americans to rise up and overthrow the government. Colonel Horatio Ehrlich can barely contain his fury. Is this how loyal services are paid, he demands. Bit by bit, our prerogatives removed, our authority undermined. First injustice, then humiliation. Now communist hooligans led by this Correa presume to replace me. I will convince the troops to lay down their arms, Presidente, if you say the right word. And restore him to his position as Chief of Staff. Yeah, I mean, honestly, I don't want the guy fired because that's going to be a problem. But, Let's see what she has to say exactly. Such an emergency calls for delicate negotiation. We don't want to become yet another regime overthrown by its military, I agree. In choice of training, aid, and bold attempts at reform, we have allowed Subcomandante Correa to gain the upper hand. By restoring a measure of power to the Colonel Ehrlich, we should be able to defuse the crisis. Let's do it. I don't like you, Ehrlich, but we gotta have you in power, basically. Taught with tension, the Colonel seems to relax a bit. It shall be as you command, my Presidente, he pronounces with measured enthusiasm. Ortiz nods with approval, yep. Okay. So that went well, I guess, kind of. Let's talk to the doctor. Healthcare, how are we going to do here? Try to get the infant mortality rate lowered. It's pretty abysmal. Actually horrifying. It's like twice as high as the rest of Latin America and like 10 times as high as the Americans. Encountering Dr. Judith Escobar de Royce. Rural Health Clinic, Yaramela Province. 1 physician, 3 healthcare workers. Serves a population of 12,000. Let's see her bio. Commissioner of Health. Holds degrees in internal medicine and public health from the University of Mexico. Her years of effort to improve healthcare systems in Chimerica were continually frustrated by a shortage of funds under the Farsantes. Quietly supported the insurrection, hoping that a new government would set different priorities. Well, you're in luck, because, I am going to plan to increase healthcare funding. Presidente, for decades this nation has ignored the healthcare needs of all but the wealthy few. Children die of measles, of malaria, of diseases easily prevented with proper sanitation. Many rural areas have no doctors, no nurses, no medicines, no medical services at all. Is it surprising, then, that we have one of the highest levels of infant mortality in the hemisphere? We must build clinics in small villages throughout the country, with people trained to run them. We must begin at once. This is going to be really expensive, actually, because think about all the stuff we're going to have to do. We're going to have to build clinics, that's important. We're going to have to get medical supplies, that's expensive as well, because we don't have anything to produce them in our country. We're going to have to get physicians from other countries, because we don't have skilled, educated doctors at all. I mean, yeah, we are getting Cubans here, that's useful, but still, we're going to need a lot more, so that's going to be extremely expensive to do, all of this. But worth it, I think. Medical care in this country is a disgrace. Here, the rich can afford private doctors and fly off to Mexico or USA whenever they need to see a specialist. Meanwhile, the poor die of easily preventable diseases. We must build community clinics throughout the nation, but especially in rural areas where the need is greatest. Creating a primary health care system must be a top priority for a truly revolutionary government. Well, I'm not a truly revolutionary government. I am a revolutionary government, and I have an objective, which is to build the country. So we're going to do that. We're going to do this. Yep. Escobar gathers up her papers and smiles. I am pleased to see, Presidente, that our government has a clear sense of priorities. People of Chimerica, thank you. If a revolution truly serves the people, it will remind us of those crosses that we ought to bear but find it convenient to ignore. Let's go talk to our advisors. Actually, let's check the newspapers, see what they had to say. Expelling the communist rebels does not go far enough. They should be arrested and deported so they may face their appropriate authorities in their homelands. I mean, I did what the U.S. wanted, okay? There's nothing more extreme I could have done, I don't think. So, revolution is not something you can pack in a burlap sack like coffee. You cannot even pack it in wooden crates like the ones they use to ship guns and ammunition. Wherever there is social injustice, whether others help or not, the people will arise. Well, good, then let them do it, because we're not going to fund that crap. There's some evidence that the Chimerican army has in fact been tripping arms to the rebels. The same evidence would suggest, however, that those relatively small shipments do not amount to a significant factor in the rebellion. So even though we're going to have all the political costs and just general stupidity of helping those rebels, it doesn't even matter to them. Like, the rebellion's not benefiting seriously from it. Sending arms to those attempting to overthrow government constitutes a serious interference in other nations' internal affairs from which all OAS members are pledged to refrain. Oh boy, yeah, because the U.S. is definitely not going to do that stuff. El Independiente says, by granting amnesty to the worst men the nation has ever produced, they have signed the death warrant for thousands of the best. I didn't do that. Ehrlich did, so keep that in mind. No more will the children of Chimerica suffer silently. No more will the mothers of Chimerica be forced to watch their children die helpless in the face of easily curable disease. The government clinic will protect them. The death toll in the countryside continues to mount, 59 one week, 72 the next. By what of the land reform law? One brave fellow was heard to ask as the soldiers dragged him from his home. The law? We are the law, the helmeted demon shrieked. Ehrlich's goons, man, that's what that is. Now that the country has given a resounding no to absurd and unpatriotic idea of land reform, Chimerican agriculture may be free to prosper once again. I didn't do that, man. I didn't say no to land reform, honestly. Like experienced torturers, the agriculturemen, we didn't stop land reform. That just didn't happen. After receiving a series of well-publicized death threats, rural labor leader Claudio Aguilar Herrera has disappeared from view. It is unclear if the MIT chief has been murdered, or is that MIT? Seriously? Whatever, or has gone underground, but in recent days he made no secret of his disillusionment with the government's vacillations posturing on land reform. Dude, land reform went to the people who needed it. I wasn't gonna give it to just poor people. I mean, come on. Be reasonable. So it looks like the death squads are killing people left and right. We need to talk to the bishop. Catholic Church is a big deal here, so Placido Dimas Hernandez, Cathedral of Pueye, headquarters of the Human Rights Commission of Chimerica, funded and led by the Catholic Church. Yeah, the Catholic Church is actually a really big deal in South American countries, in Latin America in general, and kind of in Africa too, especially where human rights are concerned, because social justice, the game kind of talked about it a little bit, but liberation theology, basically it's a left-leaning ideology inspired by a Marxist interpretation of the Bible, kind of. And its main goal isn't economic, equality for the sake of utopia. It's social justice for the sake of the morality laid out in the Bible, basically. And because of that, at this point in time, especially in the 80s and the 70s, liberation theology was very contentious. It's not really today in the Catholic Church, because in Latin America there were lots of very prominent members of the Catholic Church who endorsed it, and then you had the papacy in Rome, who basically dealt with the horrors of communism and couldn't just sign off on it because that's giving support to communists. So it was a political move, really, because the church does support all of the causes of liberation theology, but it can't support the people who are supporting those causes. I mean, that's what it amounts to. So you had a conflict between the Vatican and the various dioceses in Latin America, and it still kind of exists today. I mean, it's not political now, really. I mean, it's more a religious interpretation trying to justify whether, the prosperity of capitalism as it works within the majority of the world actually is a good thing, or if indeed the government and the church has a responsibility to step in and do these things. So that's kind of the thing. Oh, and another thing aside from the okay, here you go. This is kind of explaining it a little bit. Bishop Special Legate of the Archbishop of Pueye, founder and director of the Human Rights Commission of Chimerica, chairman Chimerican Electoral Council, takes a neutral stance on the liberation theology debate that has split the church in Latin America, even-handedly critical of all abuse of authority. Okay, so never mind. He doesn't really explain it. But what I was going to say is basically that the other reason that the Vatican would oppose liberation theology is because, kind of historically, I guess, recently, in the modern period, the church has strived to stay out of politics, basically. It doesn't want the church and the government to be closely linked, because the Vatican nowadays is not it's not a national thing anymore. It's not in charge of parts of Italy. It no longer has a real interest in keeping control over certain other governments to keep them from messing with its interests. So it doesn't have the reason to do that. And so doctrinally as well, it was never supported to do that. So it's no longer, the temporal authority of the church doesn't exist realistically. And he wants us to outlaw Olympia. I agree. Let's outlaw Olympia. Yeah. Okay. Second year of your presidency, the dry season ends and the rainy season begins. And again, these guys are messed up. So apparently firing Olympia will fire Ehrlich because he's in charge of it. So Ehrlich is officially in charge of the death squads. I mean, come on. Guys, let me get rid of him. Jeez. Whatever. Weekly log of the Human Rights Commission reprinted as a public service. Unidentified woman, approximately 20, purple pants, red blouse, found strangled in Overagos Road. Antonio Flores Mejevar, professor at the University of Chimerica, shot to death by two men at the university gate. Number 145, body found at the door of the Devil, identified as Jose Raul Henriquez, member of the Union of Campesinos. Ismael Alvarado son Jose de la Flores, killed by soldiers while delivering beans to his village. Gradually losing hope, the new government would be able to put an end to horrific violence that plagued the nation during the final years of the dictatorship. The toll includes teachers, students, labor organizers, anyone associated with the National Liberation Party. That's bad news. That's real bad news. So the death squads are seriously just kind of declaring open season on us. And I can't outlaw them because I can't get rid of Ehrlich. And the USA yesterday says, in Washington, the Assistant Secretary of State from Latin American Affairs questioned charges that the death squads are linked to the Chimerican government. They're not. It might be right, but I suspect it probably isn't right, he said, attributing the recent killings instead to a significant increase in criminal violence stemming from the underworld turf wars. You know, it might be true that Ehrlich is just looking out for his drug interests, but I think he's actually just a friggin' douchebag who wants to kill people he associates with communism. It's a real bad. This is a bad deal, basically. Tax on land reform, but I can't. If I want to keep the army together, I can't get rid of him. That's just the fact of the matter. I can't. So it's either basically go into a civil war over this issue, or let it happen. I guess that's kind of the two choices we're presented with. I don't like them. I don't like either of those choices. But, I don't think we can handle a civil war, economically or otherwise. I don't think it's reasonable to think that that's possible. The Electoral Council must be decided upon the division of powers among governmental branches. We ask that you encourage them to strengthen the National Assembly and construct clear divisions between the functions of political parties and the functions of government. Support a strong legislature and strict separation between parties and government. So he kind of wants a parliamentary setup. Let's see. Okay, the only one with a different opinion, as I expected, is the Internal Affairs Minister. How strong should the executive branch be in our new constitution? We favor a strong executive with veto powers. The structure of the National Assembly should reflect the strong involvement of political parties in a parliamentary model. Support a strong executive branch with a strong party involvement in parliamentary processes. I don't agree with you at all. Neither of these things are optimal. Personally, I would prefer the United States three-branch system. But I'm definitely not putting a strong executive in power. That's just stupid. And putting, parties and government together, I think, is a bad idea. Whether parliamentary or not, but especially if parliamentary, it's just not cool. It's not a good thing. So we'll do what Ignacio says. We'll follow your leadership in this matter with unreserved enthusiasm. Healthcare, conflicts between unions and employers. I can't. Okay, I have to pick an issue. All right, let's talk about conflicts between unions and employers. The next step beyond a guarantee of the right to strike, your minister argues, is to set a nationwide salary structure. Everyone with a certain level of skill will earn the same amount. Oh, this is going nowhere real fast, I can tell you that. Sorry, man, but that's just stupid. Let's see what Ignacio has to say about this. Now that we have raised the minimum wage, the union should be content for a while. Our first priority, after all, is to get production moving again. Radical demands for more steel should be met with firmness and resolve. I'm inclined to agree it's not feasible for us to expand anything, really. Economic aid from the USA. Sweet, we'll get more aid. Because of the U.S. aid projects, Chimerican farmers who used to grow only corn and beans will soon export endivs, cauliflower, snow peas, and cut flowers. Making more entrepreneurial campesinos into commercial farmers will help improve our balance of payments. Awesome. Totally awesome. Of course, social justice guy wants to just give it to the people who friggin' are starving, but we're going to do it for Yeah, we need to improve our balance, our expenditures versus revenue. Let's talk about, is there a corruption issue here? More nationalism, popular democracy, shortages of food. Let's take a look at our reports, see how much that's costing us now. Whoops. Okay, I guess no. Wait, is this stuff we've already seen? Yeah. I'm gonna go take a look at the reports and see military expenses. They've stable. They're now reasonable. $100 million. That's the military expenditures we have, and the U.S. aid is almost as much as the entire money that we're spending on it. Now this is starting to become quite expensive. It's over 2.3 billion or 2.5 billion Chimericas. The highest expenditure in our country, flat out, is food. We'll see if we can cut that off yet or not. And the state holds almost no land. Private firms hold a good portion of the land. Still, most of the land is in the wealthiest 5%. Highly inefficient. Very bad, personally, I think. All right, this is stable. I think we can afford to. Oh, this is good. This is increasing now. Coffee production. Hard currency earnings, making more on coffee, less on cotton. Cotton's stupid. Currency reserves, we're still making money. That's good news. So our debt is increasing, but our currency reserves are also increasing. Looks like our debt is almost $2 billion, which is nothing, really. I mean, even in the 80s, that's nothing. For our country, I guess Chimerica has a population of about 4 million, I think, from the manual. But that's comparable to about 2 Kansases, basically. Maybe 1.5, 1.75, probably the most accurate. And I'm pretty sure our state budget is actually running a deficit of about that amount. So, I mean, I don't think we're really doing too bad as a country, if that's our national debt. And apparently we're not even running a deficit, right? Because we're stockpiling money right now. We're running a surplus, even though we have high debt. That's because we're accepting loans and stuff from the IMF and we're getting aid from other countries. That's why we're increasing debt. It's not because we're spending more money than we have. Let's see, unions and employers. I want to see if we can do a corruption issue because that's like a really big issue, I think, honestly, to deal with. We'll do more democracy stuff. Many of our neighbors limit presidentes to one term of office only. This is the best way to prevent Farsante-style dictatorships. Furthermore, to prevent family dynasties like the Farsantes, no close relative should be allowed to succeed the outgoing president. Well, I don't know about that. Let's see what our internal affairs minister has to say. If someone is unqualified to serve as presidente, your minister argues, why should it matter who he is related to? If he is the one the people want, the Constitution should allow him to serve. Support few restrictions on presidential succession. I'm inclined to agree with him, but we need to have balance in our Constitution because that is the major goal of the junta, is actually just to set up the Constitution, to set up the country, basically. So we need to have something that's going to appease, it's going to allow the country not to fall apart. We need to have something in there for all three parties, and Christian reform basically handles that by doing its own thing. So we're going to do that. We're going to support one presidential term and strict limits on succession. So at most, we can have a 6 years, I think 6 to 7 years, depending on how long the presidential term is in Chimerica, for our guy in charge. Although we will only play 3, because we only play for the junta period. So even if we're reelected, we will not continue playing beyond that point. Ortiz nods with approval. Wise choice, Presidente. Yep. All right. If no one has anything to say about corruption, then I'm going to do something about international affairs. International relations. The PLO and North African nation of Libya have suggested establishing diplomatic, cultural, and economic relations with Chimerica. As I see it, we have more to lose than we have to gain by dealing with countries and organizations with such dubious international reputations. You're right. You're just plainly right about that. It's not a good idea for us. Even if we thought they were right, which I don't think they are, either of those, that puts us in a bad situation for no real reason. This guy wants to. What's his argument? For too long we have allowed ourselves to depend on one dominant market for our crops. As the world economy grows and more intertwined, ours should intertwine along with it. The first step to establish relations with the new trading partners. The North African oil producer Libya has expressed a desire to open diplomatic and economic relations. We also heard from the PLA. We should recognize them also as a legitimate representative of the sovereign people. So you just want to do it because you like their causes. Economically, it's not sound. Libya's not going to be able to buy large quantities of cotton or coffee from us. That's just not going to happen. And the PLO can't. It's actually just impossible for them. So let's go ahead and decline. Yep. Anything else here? We'll do another international relations. Worker unrest has erupted into general strike in the People's Republic of Panslavia. Oh boy. A nation in Eastern Europe. Their government's response has been sharply repressive, culminating in the imposition of martial law. We must now consider a resolution condemning this action, introduced by the U.S. I recommend we avoid entanglement in what is essentially a matter internal to that nation. He wants us to abstain from voting. I think we should back the U.S. Everyone agrees to abstain from voting. I'll see what he has to say about it. Current debate in the UN concerns the imposition of martial law in the Eastern European nation of Panslavia. In the General Assembly, the U.S. calls on the Panslavia government to stop repressing its people. Chimerica has little to gain by getting involved in this dispute. Oh, so now, because it's against U.S. interests, you're all interested in staying out of it. Whatever, Julio. I don't buy it. You're kind of trendy. But whatever. We're going to abstain from voting because that's the only option I have. I can't choose what I want to do. From the coroner's office, we have identified... Oh, son of a... Okay. The body of a female, catalog 4298806D, found at the base of the cliffs known as Door of the Devil. Deceased, Gloria Mendoza Lerma. Profession, housewife, also known as founder of the human rights organization Mothers of the Disappeared. Cause of death, strangulation. So the friggin' death squads killed our equivalent of Mother Teresa. They friggin' murdered her. And they killed the guy in charge of the labor union. That's two of the people they murdered, straight up. That's the price of not allowing the country to fall into civil war. If we want stability, I mean, that's basically what's got to be paid for. I mean, it's a blood price, but it's a much higher one if we do a civil war. Sorry, but that's just the truth. Oddly, the Presidente seems more concerned with the faraway affairs than the threat of subversion here at home. Well, whatever. Many have begun to wonder when the leader is going to stop polishing the presidential image in the world opinion and start attending to the serious problems facing our nation. Diwania Bacterianists made another raid across the Lebanese border today. After blowing up a school, the four masked guerrillas kidnapped a bus loaded with Israeli and European tourists. Diwania's continued sponsorship of terrorism has brought the patience of senior State Department officials to the breaking point. Senores Rosaminda Castillo de Erlich and Gloria Padilla de Mendieta could not have been more pleased with their glittering crowd assembled for their joint baby shower. Oh, you gotta be kidding me. Their valiant husbands Horacio and Manuel were unfortunately off fighting the enemies of our country. The rest of Le Petit Poyer was there. Damn it. The week before Senor Mendoza's assassination, her name had appeared on a death list of over 500 names circulated as a warning by death squads. So far, 19 persons named on the list have been killed and others have fled the country. In response to the inability of the government to curtail death squad violence, which is this week's highest level, yet with the assassination of the leader of the Mothers of Disappeared, the government of Sweden announced it was canceling all aid to Chimerica. Okay, this is getting annoying. In his weekly radio address, the President explained why he had again certified to Congress that human rights and conditions were improving in Chimerica. What we see in Chimerica is an attempt to destabilize the entire region and move anarchy toward the American border. This is a bold attempt by the Soviet Union and Cuba to install communism by force throughout the hemisphere. That's just a blatant lie. That's not what's happening at all. Let's see what the USSR ambassador can do for us. If he can do anything for us, maybe he can help. Accept military aid. No, we can't. Oh, look, yeah, the crappy Soviet stuff's breaking down. But we'll continue to accept it. Yeah. Ambassador Razumov nods. After so long in the shadow of the dictator, you and your comrades understandably find the bright glare of power a bit dazzling. Let your eyes adjust before rushing on. Bright daylight or no, it is easy enough to lose your way. And he likes what we did. He doesn't. The USSR ambassador doesn't like it. He doesn't want us to do that. Honestly, though, I'm kind of thinking it might be necessary pretty soon to do that. I'm going to talk to the USA, see if they can help us out. New offers of aid. A wide range of development projects await your approval, Bufford says expansively. The list includes rural electrification, teaching small farmers how to grow vegetables for the U.S. winter market, infrastructure improvement to improve the efficiency of export producers, and grants to train engineers and managers at U.S. universities. That's really helpful. We're definitely agreeing to that. Then it is agreed, Bufford says with a firm handshake. Chimerica and the USA shall be partners in progress. Our unique reservoir of experienced engineers, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. Second year of the presidency. The raising season ends and the harvest season begins. Okay, so here's the thing. This is basically what it seems like to me. I'm pretty sure that the U.S. aid is entirely contingent on the Army being a, not really bipartisan, but, you know, the two forces of the old guard and the new have to be together. I don't think the U.S. is going to support us if that breaks down. If we enter a civil war, we're screwed. Because Ehrlich is the right-wing guy. He's not really in favor of U.S. interests. He's just out for himself and friggin' his drug money and things like that. But they'll support him over Korea, that's for sure. So what it comes down to is, and this is why I'm put in a situation where I can't really do anything effective. I don't have a lot of power in this country, really. I'm the executive leader, but I don't have a broad range of abilities to do whatever I want. And the political situation here is really bad because of the strength of the army, but this is the way it goes. Basically, if I decide to try and stop the death squads, which are definitely led by Ehrlich, there's no doubt about it. If I decide to stop those, that will fire him from the army. That's just the way it's going to go, because he's the leader of Olympia, apparently. He's in charge of that. He's in charge of the death squads. I can't do that because if he's fired, first off, we're going to deal with an insurgency. He's not just going to go away. He's going to screw with us. Yeah, he's got a death squad already. He's screwing with us when he's in power. I mean, if we get him out, he's definitely coming at us with force. But the other reason we can't do it is because we're going to lose U.S. aid. And the primary thing keeping our economy together right now is international aid. So we just can't afford it at all on any part of the spectrum there. It can't happen. So we got to live with it. We got to live with all the unfortunate consequences. At a certain point, human rights, I mean, human rights issues are a big deal, but I can't afford to sacrifice the stability of the whole country and destroy our economy over it. And even if I did, I don't think that we'd come out on top, because the U.S. isn't going to back us militarily in that conflict. No way. Our army would be composed of basically half of the army, and it's the less well-equipped half. It's the better experience. So it's all the guerrilla fighters, but these are the guys who have the not even the AKs. They got like friggin' I don't know what, but probably like friggin' French and Spanish guns left over from the 20s and the 30s and stuff like that. But yeah, we would not be able to do well in a conflict against the insurgency. That's just the way it goes. So ultimately, human rights issue, in terms of lives lost, it's way more expensive to try to go after them, even though you might think it's the right thing to do. And I'm pissed that that's the way it is, because it's really annoying that I'm in that situation, but it's not my fault. I can't do anything about it. They set the country up with the army in power that way, and I can't dismantle it effectively, period. Anything new here? No. Alright, let's go talk to consultations. Ah, good. Corruption. Launch a special investigation. Okay. Just because the big thief is gone doesn't mean all the little thieves will turn into saints. Some officials use their positions to import fancy cars duty-free and resell them for huge profits. Others seem to think we should use the foreign aid earmarked for development to develop their bank accounts. Has to be expected in any third world country, really. What's our internal affairs minister say? The idea seems to be taking hold that robbing the government is not robbing. Since it belongs to everyone, I take only what is mine. On ministry time, for example, using ministry materials and ministry employees, the director of the waterworks built a swimming pool in his own backyard. This is not what we mean by revolutionary egalitarianism. He wants us to launch a special investigation of misuse of time. These guys are talking about corruption of the bureaucracy. This is misuse of funds. That's way more important than misuse of time. Sorry. Overthrow the dictator is not our most difficult task. Yep. Credit culture, the taxable ambition. Alright, let's see what we can do about a tax on land reform beneficiaries. Ah, cool, we can give Korea control. Yes, that's happening, period. We have tried everything, your minister says unhappily, to teach the regular forces to better handle their responsibilities. The dismal result has been the utter chaos in our land reform program. Other forces evidently make the question of troop discipline secondary. It is time to shift responsibility for rural security within the army. Though this step puts at risk the fragile balance we have struggled to maintain, the risk of inaction outweighs the risk of action. I agree. We're doing it. Claudio Aguilar. Oh, good. He's not dead. He's just in exile. That's good. I thought the death squad had killed him, but he went underground because he is afraid of the death squads, basically. Honored Presidente, we are encouraged by the recent victory of the Comandante Compañeros in the army over the holdovers from the Farsantismo. For too long, the rest of us hid ourselves away, fearing the death that comes at night. Now your actions make us bold. We are eager to begin again the process of land reform and look for your attention to the people. Alright, so that's good. Ehrlich's not gone, but okay, what do we got here? The violence in the countryside will not end, it is clear, until this ungodly land reform is abolished. That's not happening, sorry. Land reform is happening because it's useful. A family of 6 gunned down as they gathered for a humble meal. Their crime, asserting their rights to clean water supply, rights distributed to a neighborhood landlord. Soldiers pretend all day to protect the land reform, and by night they do their best to destroy it. Not all the monsters in Chimerica found their way into the guard. Like deadly viruses, some live for years in the heart until one day they spring forth to turn the living into the dead. Both administration and beneficiaries of the reform have been killed, many in particularly gruesome fashion. The government officials claim that the Presidente is concerned about the mounting death toll in the countryside, but so far little action has been taken that would substantiate the claim. In Washington, State Department spokesman denied that the Chimerican army was responsible for the attacks on peasant leaders. These alleged incidents are frame-ups by leftists who dress in army uniforms and try to make martyrs for their cause. That's just wrong. It's actually just a lie. That's not true at all. Let's talk to the campesino. See how he's doing. Alarcon sighs. Presidente, I have so much to tell you. Yes, the government guarantees us a certain price for our corn and beans, but when a man with a truck comes offering for more, and when I say no, who will say no when I want to sell the government at a lower price? The traders offer cash or barter with kerosene and other things campesinos need. The government purchase offers checks, which many campesinos have never seen before. All of this is too clumsy and confusing. Alright, so he wants the campesinos want an end to food controls on food prices. I'll do it. That's fine. Well, he says, we shall see where all these new ideas lead, but you have to plow through with the burrows you have, eh? Plow with the burrow you wish to have but don't, and you won't have much time to come harvest, or you won't have much come harvest time. Streets of Pouillet, thousands go to the, okay, yeah, the food price jumped. Oh, duh. Sorry, we're dispersing this. Ferrer scowls with distaste. Where did you learn to cook up revolutions? He asked darkly. Any decent recipe calls for generous amounts of corn, beans, sugar, and milk. Hey, man, the food producers said... It's not a good idea. Sorry. Campesinos don't want food controls anymore. We're not going to have them. Our country's fine, honestly. Message from the president's personal staff. The offices of the daily newspaper El Independiente burned to the ground last night. At the same time, elsewhere, 2 members of the newspaper's staff were decapitated. Surviving editors have left the country and do not plan to reopen the paper. Great, great. So now they're destroying our newspapers. That's friggin' wonderful. What's our defense minister say? Death squads and human rights. Ehrlich should not oversee Olympia, man. Jeez, that's a bad idea. God, okay. I question the need for paramilitary organizations such as Mayor Padilla's Olympia. If unregulated, such groups become impossible to control and begin to rival legitimate security forces in power and influence. Perhaps the military had control over Olympia. We wouldn't be able to modify the recent excesses. Fine. We'll do it. It's stupid. It's wrong. But we'll do it. Let's talk about democracy. As we pass into the electoral season, we must do all we can to encourage respect and support for our new system of laws. He wants us to continue to support the establishment of constitutional basis for Chimerican law. So basically, we'll see detailed advice and hear what he has to say. We are allowing a great opportunity to pass by. Why not experiment with new ways of building democracy? To build true democracy will mean empowerment on all levels of society. Best way to do that is by encouraging popular associations. Again, man, you just don't understand. You don't understand realistically what democracy is, so I can't do it. Once again, you've chosen well, Nunez says. Yeah, okay. Alright, jeez. What can we do? We'll do an encounter here. Let's talk to Ehrlich. God, this friggin' guy. Hold to a careful balance between the tradition. Yes. In many ways, Presidente, we have here in Chimerica the perfect opportunity to diminish the threat to a powerful military proposed for a government such as ours. If we can keep the two sides merged equally, each one will check any more ambition by the other. Yep. The colonel stands motionless, as if expecting something more. Very well, he finally says. But you are playing with a snake, Excellency. Be careful. If the snake bites you, there is no remedy at the pharmacy. He wheels about sharply and strides away, somehow forgetting to salute you. Screw you, Ehrlich. You're a true bastard. You are a bastard, plain and simple. Alright, let's talk with our banker. Encountering Jorge Quezada Sonichsen, National Bank of Chimerica, under the personal control of Anastasio Fersante until his overthrow, since then managed by the Chimerican government. Biography of Jorge, President of the National Bank of Chimerica, regarded as one of the most astute and flexible financial minds of the nation. Never personally close to the dictator, he skillfully managed to moderate the legendary Farsante greed, despite their tendency to view the entire bank as a personal account. Good day, Presidente, Quezada greets you, a bit stiffly. Laudable as may be the humanitarian intentions that motivate our current lending priorities, I must advise that they make little economic sense. Many campesinos will quite simply never be able to repay our loans, even on the generous terms we grant them. We must return to a focus on export crops. And well, this guy thinks otherwise. While we can afford to, we can try to improve the lot of the campesinos. If we manage to increase production of basic foods, we won't have to import so much of them. But it is still the export producers who keep this economy going. So he wants to divide basically equally. Leaning back in his chair, head tilted to one side, Quezada studies you. These are difficult times, which call us to remain flexible in our thinking. We at the bank will abide by your decision, Presidente. Yeah. Okay, let's see about the Cuban consul. Encountering Dr. Ricardo Guzman Micola. Economic aid offered by the People's Republic of Cuba consists mainly of medical equipment and training, teachers, and agricultural technology, notably large-scale sugar refineries. So it's just, basically, Cuban aid is better than Soviet aid, period. It's more useful. They won't, neither of them are going to give us cash, but what the Cubans do is give us skilled people. What the USSR does is give us crappy, broken, worthless machinery, basically. And they don't give us skills. They never send us advisors, economic advisors. I think they gave us agronomists, but we're not doing a command economy anyway, so that's basically useless to us. I mean, we're doing land reform, sure, but whatever. Trained as an engineer, also played shortstop and is used for the Cardenas Sugar Kings. Past postings include Mexico, Venezuela, and several nations in Africa. The first Cuban official in Chimerica after the Farsante period. Under Farsante, there were no relations with Cuba at all. To win a ball game, the consul says wryly, you must practice with both your fielding and your batting. I would advise closer attention to your defense needs. If you can possibly avoid incurring the wrath of the United States, more power to you. Both your history and ours, however, cast a doubt on the wisdom of putting much faith in that possibility. The Cuban Revolution stands ready to coach Chimerica in its efforts to win the right to follow its own destiny. He wants us to accept military aid from socialist countries. Though we should be thankful for the aid offered us by the socialist nations, it is unfortunate that the quality of the goods they send us is not better. Yeah, we'll do the limited economic assistance. Fidel Castro, Cousin's eyes Garrett narrow. Fidel Castro, as usual, said it best. Revolutionaries cannot just sit in the doorway of their homes and wait for the corpse of imperialism to pass by. The role of the job does not befit a revolutionary. Message from National Bank Director of Quezada. A number of international banks have expressed to me their grave concern with Chimerica's rapidly rising level of debt. May I suggest that we do our utmost to keep government expenditures to a minimum and increase the volume of exports. In the third year of the presidency, the harvest season begins and the dry season ends. Alright, so it's the third year, man. We're close. We're getting close to the end of our junta. Let's see if we can talk about elections with anyone. Yeah, we'll do that, I guess. I thought they'd have more to say on it. Let's take a look at the newspapers. At the first sign of difficulty with its price controls, the government... Whatever, we had it running for like 2 years. The government threw up its hands and ran screaming for the shelter of father repression. Are these really the same brave revolutionaries who overthrew the dictator? At the time of the firebombing, El Independiente's news editor and one of its photographers were eating a late dinner at the popular restaurant El Manganita. Witnesses observed 4 men, 2 in uniform, enter through a side door and dragged them out into the street. In a matter of minutes, the 2 men were hacked to death in full view of the horrified restaurant patrons. Friggin' Ehrlich, man. Now, I know it all looks bad, and it is bad, but, again, you gotta weigh the cost of doing something about that, and it's just too high. It's just too high. And the U.S. aid is now actually more than our national military expenditure. That's great news. In a manner of speaking. I mean, in another way it's not, because, and there we go, losses from food price subsidies, they dropped immediately to 0, because we ended them. Infant mortality's dropped, good. Land distribution, awesome. We're seeing a drop in the wealthiest 5%, and the major private producers, the majority of private producers, are indeed now almost at 50% of the land holdings. Which, again, it's ridiculous that, the friggin' richest people have so much of the land because they don't use it effectively at all. So, yeah, we ended price controls. That's slightly increased our percent of the population that's eating less than we should have, basically. But overall, we're doing great since we took office. And, that we're doing just awesome. Cotton price continues to plummet because cotton's stupid to grow. Coffee price is kind of leveled off. Hard currency earnings. We're making good money on it. We're supporting coffee producers and campesinos pretty well, so I'd expect that. Meanwhile, cotton is just worthless, stupid. Stop growing it, people. Hard currency reserve. We're still making money. Our debt is almost $2 billion. Not a big deal, really. I mean, if the IMF wants to whine, let them whine, because I'm not going to friggin' do austerity. That's not happening. In fact, we have extra money. You know what we're going to do? We're going to friggin' expand. See if we can do infrastructure. Let's see if anyone here has infrastructure available. No? Alright, let's talk about healthcare. Our public health program is off to an excellent start. With a healthier population, we'll be better able to help build a healthy future for all Chimericans. The next step is a nationwide vaccination campaign to immunize children against easily preventable diseases. To run such a campaign requires needles, vaccines, and transportation for health professionals. Increase funding for health care. Yeah, we're doing it. I don't care what the other people think. U.S. Ambassador Buffers. Excellency, reports continue to point to links between the death squads and Major Patia's Limpia and parts of the Army. Gross abuses of human rights here receive increasing attention in the international press. Alright, U.S. says we have the okay. We're friggin' banning. We're getting rid of Limpia. Let's talk to him. Outlaw Limpia. The amnestied Guardia leader, Padilla, has formed... has formed an organization called Limpia, the bishop says slowly. He pauses, knitting his fingers together and slowly wiggling them. For a moment he studies his own fingers as if reading some hidden meaning in their movements. Have you ever watched spider eggs hatch, Presidente? Hundreds of them swarming everywhere. So hungry they begin by devouring each other before going to larger game. Limpia is such a nest of little death squads. If you don't act now, they will swarm all over us. And yep, they agreed to outlaw Limpia. So, definitely doing it. And now Colonel Ehrlich, you know what, man? Really? Are we really doing this again? Fine, we maintain our military balance. I actually can't. Unless I reorganize my cabinet, I'm not going to be able to get rid of that. And I'm not going to reorganize my cabinet. And the reason I'm not doing that is because this is a good cabinet. It saw me through 3 years of this junta. Or, well, 2.5, really. But that's good. I mean, we're doing good. I mean, we have problems. It's true. But we're doing good. Let's talk about the disposition of the dictator's estate. Chimerica must develop its own industries. A good place to start would be coffee processing. The profits we make on raw beans is not nearly as high as the profits on fully processed coffee, but few of our growers have the technology for preparing such popular products as freeze-dried and decaffeinated coffee. He wants to help small farmers keep processing within Chimerica. Let's see what he says. Help co-op. That's definitely not happening. We're not doing anything with cooperatives. Okay. Yeah, I guess I agree. Thing is, though, this is basically, this is ISI, Import Substitution Industrialization. This is where we try to do things ourselves. And as I said earlier, it's failed economic policy. Now, in the 80s, it wasn't. I mean, it was still the thing to do. It was what, I mean, more in the 70s, really, before the whole Washington Consensus took over. It was what was prescribed by international institutions for these countries to do. Like the IMF, they would have said, do ISI in your country. That's what you need to do to be successful. That's how you grow your economy, is you make that stuff yourself, you make goods, and then you maybe compete on the international market with those goods, but primarily you satisfy the domestic consumer demand. And that's bad advice, actually. As it turns out, it failed 100% of the time. Never worked out. And that's what they want me to do here. But, you know what? I think since this game is made in the 1980s, that's what the game thinks is the right decision. So, and I don't really have an alternative. My only other alternative is to help let cooperatives keep it in the country. And I'm not dealing with workers' cooperatives. That's a nest that we don't want to get into, really. So, yeah. Okay, internal affairs, education. Every time a school goes up somewhere in Chimerica, the people in that village see concrete confirmation that the revolution cares about them and their children. There still remain many places we have not reached. We must bring our literacy campaign to every farm in the nation. Increase funding for education. We're doing it. I know that everyone's going to be concerned because our budget, can't take it. But screw that. Our budget's fine. We're not spending that much money. We have a currency reserve that's been growing. We have a surplus. We don't need to be saving money. We need to be spending it. And even though our debt's increasing, so what? Not a problem. The IMF's going to be pissed. They might withdraw some of their loans. But the U.S. isn't going to do anything bad. They're going to stick by us because politically, I've appeased them so much. So, Alright. Did I check these already? Did I check infant mortality? It's dropping, not significantly. Hopefully it'll see a lot bigger drop as we go over the, I think I went over all these. Loans and aid. You know, we're continuing to receive more and more, really. We really turned it around, actually. We have a really good record with the international community as far as lending goes, so it looks like we're doing well as far as growing the economy. How many meetings? We have 3 meetings left that we can do. Let's take on another encounter. Let's talk to the campesino. And he wants these, obviously. We're going to divide it equally. He says, my Presidente, I have only my fields in my head, my crops and my children, and yours there's so much more. For myself, I will be patient and persuade my friends also, but we cannot wait forever. Look, man, I know what you're saying, but frankly, we have bigger concerns at this point. Food is no longer the top issue. We got to deal with education and healthcare, and to fund those things, we got to be producing. We got to be in the black on our trade. All right, let's talk to someone we haven't talked to yet. The TNC representative. All right, this is encountering Andreas von S. Weiser, Hacienda Chimborgisa, cattle ranch under the long-term contract to Provincial Foods. In recent years, the fastest-growing Chimerican export has been low-quality beef destined for U.S. fast food outlets. Vice President for the International Marketing of Providential Foods, the U.S. subsidiary of Susug S.A., a transnational company corporation headquartered in Zurich and largely controlled by Japanese investors. For many producers, Providential is the exclusive importer of supplies and sole purchaser of their coffee, cotton, cattle, and bananas. Oh, this is actually kind of interesting. In the 80s, this is actually a big deal, actually. This whole kind of triangle between Europe, the U.S., and Japan, and the food industry, and particularly beef, was one of the most corrupt corporate experiences ever. Basically, the U.S. would sell their meat to Japan through Europe and through companies based in Europe, like the one here, and that was done by setting price controls, basically, across the entire board in the food industry. And the major problem with that, I guess, for regular citizens, is that it made things more expensive for everyone, and only benefited, basically, the people involved in these corporations. And the way they maintained it, because it's actually illegal to do that, you can't go with your competitors and say, okay, here's how much we're going to charge across the board, and then, friggin' basically fix prices so that you can earn tons of money. That's what they were doing. The way that they maintained that was by bribing government officials, basically, by not directly giving them money, but by allowing them to benefit from their stock in companies that they had. I mean, it was a really bad affair, and it's kind of interesting that this game has an element of that. I don't know if they're picking up on it, because this wasn't known in the 80s. I don't know if by 88 it was or not, but during the 80s this was not revealed to the public. It was a major scandal when it was finally uncovered. So I don't know if the game knows this or not, but I'm kind of thinking it does, because it's talking about all three at once. That's a sort of a big deal. Anyways, we have been assured, Weiser says uneasily, that the new marketing board will not interfere in relations with our growers. We hope this proves to be the case. In my experience, however, these government bureaucracies tend to take on a life of their own. As they grow, they become hungry and begin to nibble on anything within reach. Like a pet alligator, as a baby, it looks cute, but if you don't get rid of it soon, it will eventually take over your house. He wants us to abolish the National Marketing Board. And the only reason, literally the only reason he wants to do that is because it's cutting into his profits. It's producing a less profitable bottom line for him. He doesn't like that. It's not about helping our country. That's the reason that he wants to do that. Meanwhile, Francisco here, he has our country in mind. He knows, he wants at least, to do what's right. And he says, our marketing board helps the smaller farmers get a fair price to their crops. Though it produces its share of bureaucratic snafus, on balance, the idea works. We must resist, however, any suggestion that its powers expand much more. So basically, he wants to, it's his idea, I believe, or maybe it was Ignacio's. It's a Christian reform idea, basically, because it's so moderate. It's there to help the middle class, as I talked about earlier, not the actual middle class, economically speaking, just the sort of political middle class of this country, the campesinos and the coffee producers. That's why it's there, so they can compete with the people like this friggin' guy. And it's good for the country. It does help us. So I'm definitely keeping it. Vicer closes his briefcase to the snap. Well, I suppose that's it then, he says, masking considerable irritation with a feigned yawn. Whether we have anything more to discuss is entirely up to you. I cannot make my position more clear. You may take it, or we will leave it. Yeah, man, whatever. Ah, great. Another dead guy. Friggin' death squads. We've identified the body of a male, catalog 4300108D, found at the top of the cliffs known as Door of the Devil. Deceased Hector Ferreira Contrera. Profession worker and labor union official. Cause of death dismemberment. Severe bruises and burns on extremities suggest that the victim or the deceased was tortured at length. These friggin' death squads, man. Jeez, they suck. Anyways, on the heels of the success of the vaccination campaign, the Commissioner of Health announced the next great goal of the healthcare program. Children with diarrhea still die from loss of water. We must set up oral rehydration units in our health centers and train mothers how to use rehydration salts. Chimerica has become a species of deranged killing machine. As they dragged one victim away in his bathrobe, his distracted wife ran to find her husband a pair of shoes. Don't worry, one of the kidnappers assured her. Where he's going, he won't need shoes. Once again certifying to Congress that Chimerica was on the upward track with regard to human rights, the President said, I suspect that if you looked closely, you would find that though some of the crimes of these so-called death squads are committed by small, violent, right-wing, organizations is what they meant to say there, that is not part of the government. Most are actually committed by groups of communist guerrillas trying to smear the reputation of the right. See, again, that's just blatant lies. It doesn't make sense. I mean, if you even remotely glance at the situation in our country, that can't be the case. None of the people on the left benefit from the death squads. They're being executed left and right. As with the case of many of the recent victims, a cake of soap was found in Ferreira's mouth, written in blood on the skin of his forehead with letters that in Spanish spelled out the word cleansed. Okay, that's Padilla's work right there. I mean, we know he thinks of himself as the friggin' sewer man. So that's what he's doing. He wants to cleanse the country of communists. Admirable goal, I mean, honestly, but not the means by which he's doing it. At all. Okay, let's talk to the doctor. Yeah, okay. Harder we work, the more work piles up before us. Once we've immunized children against the most serious killers, there will still remain diphtheria, whooping cough, tetanus. The pace must not be allowed to slacken. Big campaigns can do much to bring the problems of healthcare to the public's attention. The long-term solutions, however, call for patience and commitment. And yeah, everyone agrees. Whatever the pressures brought to bear upon us, healthcare must remain a top priority. Since we have limited resources, however, future efforts should focus on education campaigns publicized by neighborhood health councils. Young people can be sent to explain the need for vaccination to the smallest, most isolated farms. This way we will strengthen the people's awareness of healthcare issues in ways that do not require higher levels of funding. So that's a pretty, for Julio, that's a pretty realistic response, so we'll do that. I'm pleased to see, Presidente, that our government has a clear sense of priorities. Yep. That's good news. Okay, so elections are going to be coming up pretty soon. I'm going to go talk to my advisors. Whoops, that's not what I meant to do. Where's that? Consultations. Elections. Okay. Presidente, your minister says firmly. Was the overthrow of Farsante a true revolution, or did we merely push one litter of pigs away from the trough so we could litter another, so another litter could have its turn? The people demand a referendum on your policies. Schedule elections for the National Assembly and Presidente at the end of the next season. Definitely agreeing to that. I'm here to do this. That's my job. So what I'm doing. Oh, Valerai. What? I agreed with you, man. We're doing elections. Friction between the two parts of the Reconciliation Army has finally flared into open conflict. For forces loyal to Colonel Horatio Ehrlich have gained control of the military school, while those loyal to Subcomandante Carrera have overrun the radio station where they broadcast appeals to the population. Casualties are reported in clashes throughout the nation. Ehrlich says after several hours of fighting, the traitorous members of the armed forces have been captured. My troops have dispersed the crowd surrounding the radio station in all its calm. The involvement of the subcomandante in this affair may be surmised from his rapid departure. Oh boy. So Ehrlich seized power there. Ricardo Micola says, I regret, Cuba has to leave. Oh damn. Alright, so here's the Constitution. A draft of the new Constitution has been given to the National Assembly. Among its provisions are the restriction of Presidente is to one term, a weak executive branch sharing power with legislature and judiciary and armed forces. I really don't like that they put the armed forces in there. That's friggin' annoying. The direct election of local mayors. Okay, that's a balanced Constitution. I didn't get everything I wanted, but then again, I did get some of the things I wanted, even things that the rest of my party didn't want. The Christian reform, that is. Consultations. Can I talk about friggin' elections with you guys? Okay, we'll do infrastructure. Improvements to infrastructure. Chimerica could use better roads. The only road the dictator kept repaired was the one to his house on the beach. But the roads that serve the producers of export crops are already the best we have. Out in the mountains where the campesinos live, roads are often rocky dirt paths that turn into rivers of mud for the entire rainy season. He wants us to plan infrastructure improvements that benefit both export producers and the poor. Sounds reasonable. These guys have a different idea. Let's see what they want. All right, Agriculture Minister, what do you say? Centuries ago, our Mayan ancestors used to pray, give us good roads, straight, beautiful roads. Here we are in the late 20th century, and our prayer is still the same. Poorly repaired roads mean time wasted in inefficient transport and money lost to frequent truck repair. Invest in a modern economy through increased spending on improvements to infrastructure. Yeah, I think a modern economy is better than, helping the poor, quote unquote. Weep not for the men and women of Jerusalem. Weep for yourselves and for your children. I mean, elections are coming up, right? I mean, that's happening, right? Outstanding success of the Chimerican healthcare program. Rural clinics now provide 90% of the population with access to free primary healthcare. Infant mortality has dropped significantly. One of the most impressive improvements ever seen in the developing world. Awesome. Yeah, we're spending money, but hey, that's cool. Victory over the wolf at the door. What should we do? What should we say, the bear? Or should we say the bear? Whatever the beast it is slain, all hail the hero of the hour, the Colonel Horatio Ehrlich, who has delivered us once and for all from the blood-spattered paws of the extremists. Fragile coalition leading Chimerica suffered a severe blow today as the conservative elements of the armed forces moved to reassert the Army's traditional dominance in American political life. Damn it. Friggin' Army, man. Just Ehrlich. Jeez, that bastard. Unusual attempt at merging contradictory forces finally proved unworkable. Now that the tensions within the Army have been finally resolved, observers look to a renewal of U.S. military aid. Yeah, I think we're going to have to go get more U.S. aid to try and balance friggin' Ehrlich out, honestly. National Assembly has overwhelmingly adopted the new Constitution. Everywhere we are praised. Chimerica took a historic step today, and the Constitution. National Assembly, Oh, I'm going back. Whoops. Oh, next. That's why. Let's talk with the bishop. We are sorry for you, my child, and sorry still for the many innocents you have allowed to be massacred. It is evident that you have no control of the actions of the security forces. Therefore, we can only pray for them and their victims, and for you. Well, he's going to pray for me. With the dismissal of Subcomandante Correas, Minister sighs with anger. We lost all hope of prosecuting the Presidente Guard torturers. Now they have returned as death squads. Who are the dead? Workers in the National Liberation Party, officials of the Human Rights Commission, labor organizers. Under your leadership, it seems nothing will be done to protect them. Man, I tried. I tried several times. I was not allowed to do anything about it. Bishop stands motionless, listening to your minister's explanations after the recital of a poem he already knows by heart and yet does not particularly care for. When the explanations are finished, he nods and goes out without a word. You gotta make sacrifices, man. I mean, it was big. We had to make a lot of sacrifices, but jeez. Padilla greets you with great courtesy. I call my new organization Limpia, meaning clean, he says confidentially, because that is the condition in which we will soon have the country. We do not ask for medals, we do not ask for help, we ask merely for the freedom to quietly go about our patriotic duty. Ehrlich, you're going to oversee it. That's the best I can even friggin' do now. Ricardo says, for some time my staff and family have been in physical danger here in Chimerica. Repeated appeals to your security forces have been unavailing. Yeah, Cuba left. And that's not good. Let's take a look at the reports. And yeah, Cuba pulled out its aid, but I think we're still getting aid from the USSR, right? I mean, I don't think they would pull out. Let's take a look at our progress charts. Military expenses slightly went up, but the U.S. is overwhelmingly on top as far as that goes. Social spending, that's good to go. Infant mortality, significant drop. That's good. And that'll continue to go down as well. This is this is great. I love to see that. The wealthiest 5% are losing holdings while the private producers get more. And people are getting hungry again, kind of, but we're doing okay. Coffee production's going up. That's great. Hard currency earnings. Cotton continues to be worthless garbage that people continue to make for no reason. It's stupid. And coffee's doing well. Currency reserves. We're making more money, man. We almost caught up to our debt. I mean, on the graph anyways. It's not even close. That's millions versus billions. So, but still, that's good. Loans and aid, we're getting plenty. We didn't get it cut off, even though Cuba left. Alright, let's see. Alright, USA, can you help us more? Yeah, we're just going to agree to their proposal. And I want to see about the elections, man. That's going to be coming up pretty soon. No. Yeah, there's no way to fix that stuff. Let's see what we can do about international relations. In response to terrorist provocations, U.S. jet fighters recently made a punitive raid on the Middle Eastern nation of Diwania. In the UN, Diwania has proposed a resolution condemning the attack. The kind of violent reaction cannot be condoned. It is too reminiscent of Chimerica's own history of unilateral actions from superpowers. You know, I think that's kind of a bad idea, honestly. I think the U.S., we need to keep them in good position. We don't get any benefit out of this, frankly. But we'll do it. That's the only option we have. Ehrlich says, after a protracted battle, we've utterly destroyed a group of terrorists led by the notorious agitator and escaped convict Claudio Aguilar. Our troops sustained minimal casualties while the enemy was nearly annihilated. Aguilar himself escaped along with a number of his henchmen, but a company of our most experienced counterinsurgency troops have been assigned to pursue and capture him. And, they say counterinsurgency, they mean the death squads. That's going out there and doing that, frankly. There's no counterinsurgency about it. Whatever. We can't talk to the bishop because we already did. Let's talk to the coffee grower. He wants us to give it back to him. And we're going to continue to divide it equally. Did we talk to the teacher? I think we did. Not recently, but okay, we'll do it. Yeah. So far, so good, as Arsordia says with satisfaction. But a school can only go so far without books, basic supplies. Many of our new schools last for many months without paper, without pencil, without chalk, without. Children learn to write by drawing with sticks on the dirt floor. What we have begun, we must continue. She wants to continue funding at present levels. Okay. What's the T in... Oh, yeah, we have that freaking guy. No way. Alright, USSR ambassador, what do you got for me? It has become apparent, the regional ambassador says stiffly, that the new regime in Chimerica is supposed to follow in the footsteps of the old. That's not true. We have had to close the offices of our newspaper, TASS, after its journalists received death threats. Though we are willing to continue trade relations, at this point aid is not possible. I will continue to make myself available. What do we got? Try to do what is possible to regain the confidence of socialist countries. Yeah. We're going to do that. After so long in the shadow of the dictator, you and your... Yeah, okay. Congratulations, your policies have earned you the renomination by the Party of Steady Moderate Reform. We'll stand behind you in the difficult days ahead. I am nominated by the Christian Reform. That's not surprising at all, given the fact that I friggin... 3 of them are in my cabinet. And I pretty much have been centrist this whole playthrough. A little bit left-leaning. But on the military issues, I just can't. I can't go to the left because that's... The U.S. is watching over us, you know. And we don't have the option. We don't have the luxury of doing that. So... Alright, let's see about... talk about elections. How can we continue this election campaign, your minister says with fury, in the face of such repression? The 3 members of my personal staff have had their throats cut. Hundreds have died. To announce that you are a national liberation candidate for the assembly is to commit suicide. Many of our colleagues have already fled into exile. He wants me to direct Ehrlich to put an end to political assassinations. I agree. I think it's a good idea. This guy wants me to accept aid from the U.S. government. No, no, no. My re-election campaign does not come over the friggin' political assassinations that are going on. He sighs. What man is there of you whom, if his child asks for bread, will he give him a stone? The people are our children, President. I will not be satisfied. I did what you wanted, man. Jeez. Talk about elections again. I accept your advice. He looks troubled. Very well, Presidente, but for how long can we stand aside and wash our hands like the Roman procurator of our ancient Judea? Damn, well. Alright, let's talk with him. See if we can get him to friggin' back down. No. Yes. Definitely. Definitely doing that. Sadly, your minister says, we have allowed the balance in the army to tip, giving those who remain in charge too much power once again. Not much can be done about this now, but though we must put down the insurgency, I urge you to do everything possible to control the excessive brutality. Completely agree. Yep. Personal staff. Father Julio Olivares died today. He was in my staff, damn it. I have to appoint a new guy. Hours after security forces kidnapped them from a press conference, their mutilated bodies were found dumped in a ditch. Members' message of condolences. Okay. Well, we got to hire a new member for the friggin' Defense Internal Affairs Minister now, so I'm not getting it for popular stability. That's just not happening. Sorry. We'll appoint this guy. No, apparently he left the country or something. I can't appoint him. How about that woman? Can I appoint her? She's way radical, though. I don't want to. Okay, she apparently left the country. I guess all the National Liberation members have fled the country. And of the popular stability, the only one who's even remotely sort of level-headed is this guy, Bernardo. And he's not that great. I'll appoint him all the same because I need someone in the job. See reports. All hail the army's stirring victory over the terrorist band. Claudio Aguilar, leader of the Communist Front Organization, Movement of the Workers of the Land, was utterly defeated and has fled into exile like the coward he is. And France says violence directed at land reform beneficiaries had until recently been a matter of secret visits in the night and disappearance of leaders. It was now erupted, however, into open warfare notable for brutal massacres by uniformed soldiers, a tide of refugees fleeing the country, and the uprooting of entire villages. Well, damn. History of the wide gulf from rich or poor. It's difficult to see how the government could have handled it better. I know. I mean, come on. What could I have done? Other than friggin' go into a civil war, honestly. That's about all I could have done. Maybe I should have, but I still think it would have been a higher cost. Army will soon have all the weapons it needs to wipe out the guerrillas once more plaguing our land. The Pentagon has promised Barbella College. Yeah, we're gonna have to pay for that crap. It's not free. The U.S. military doesn't just give you friggin' planes and stuff. Hundreds of millions of U.S. military equipment, much of which the Americans will eventually ask to pay for. Oh, well, there you go. Yep. Might be considered an extravagance in a land where most of the peasants are illiterate and children die of parasites. So, okay. Delirious crowd greets Calderon. As our beloved commandant steps from the plane, a roar like an erupting volcano surged from the crowd. You know what? I think he should win. If I don't win, that guy should win. Because popular stability is just not a good idea. It's going to screw us over. Commandant Calderon shows no sign of having moderated his views. In his first speech since being named candidate of the National Liberation Party, he denounced the betrayal of the revolution, calling on voters to strike a resounding blow against the brutal aggressors. Crowds delirious with seventh enthusiasm rushed towards the streets, calling with one voice the name Rosario, Rosario. As the newly announced popular stability candidate emerged from the limousine, his noble head silhouetted in the streetlight, classically minded observers could not help but be reminded of Julius Caesar crossing the Rubicon, returning to save Rome. He would screw over the country. He'd be... If Rosario took power, he wouldn't even be able to maintain his own crap. He would totally be at the whim of Ehrlich. That's how that would go. Period. And he'd be a weak president anyways, because of the way the Constitution's set up, so... In what many took to be deliberate defiance of the president, the Popular Stability Party chose as its candidate Francisco Rosario Rosanes, scion of the Rosario family. After the assassination of Father Julio, to continue to participate in these elections would be suicidal. So did Gloria Jimenez in the radio broadcast, yeah. So I couldn't hire her because she fled the country to Mexico, so that's a bad deal for her. Alright, let's accept aid from the U.S., man. Though the recent political violence is regrettable, to call for punishment of the guilty would still be too dangerous. Your Christian Democrat supporters urge you to instead focus your platform on issues of national security and economic growth. Take all available means to bring your message to the people, including campaign visits to major cities and acceptance of aid generously offered by North Americans. Yeah, we're doing it, man. Students march from the National Assembly to the U.S. Embassy. National University, rather. Okay, what do we got? The National University has long been a hotbed of subversion. Lately, the enemy has turned it into an armed fort where they stockpile weapons and tend their wounded. These so-called students threaten to spread their provocations to the rest of the city. Such a dangerous farce cannot be permitted to continue. And our advisor says, though subversive agitators have provoked these young hotheads to violence, much of what they say makes sense. The National University is one of our proudest democratic institutions, a place where young people from poor families can come to better involve themselves through education. How will we prepare for the future without a major institution of higher learning? Yeah, we're not freaking closing down the university. Screw you, Ehrlich. Message from Ortiz. I'm deeply disturbed by the climate of violence that continues to develop the electoral process. Great. So now they're killing Christian Reform people too? Seriously? Screw you, Ehrlich. I can't do anything about him now. He's stuck with us at this point. Let's talk about exports. Anyone else have a different opinion? Yeah, we're going to let the National Marketing Board prove its usefulness. I regret to inform you today of the assassination of Oh, you got to be kidding me. The bishops got assassinated? We'll make every effort to bring his murderers to justice. The Electoral Council has placed the election process under my... Oh, you got to be kidding me now. Come on. Come on. It's under Ehrlich's control? There's no way it's going to be fair. Bishop Dumas, head of the Electoral Council, is profoundly disturbed by the assassination that forced the National Liberation Party to withdraw. He may soon announce the elections have been irretrievably compromised. In Washington, the president announced the National Liberation Party's refusal to participate in the Chimerican elections. This proves they are afraid of being tested in the open democratic forum. Her method of gaining power is not the ballot, but the barrel of a gun. Again, lies. Army police arrested 27 members of leftist groups today, including several officials of the National Liberation Party in connection with the slaying of Bishop Dumas. It seems the certainty of the assassination was a calculated move by leftist guerrillas to discredit the elections. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That's exactly what would happen. Their party is going around killing their own supporters to try and stop the elections. Okay. The bishop's slaying had all the marks of the right-wing death squad. The masked man, the white van, the standard army-issue AK-47. The army, however, continues to maintain that it was the work of leftist guerrillas and uses the assassination as an excuse to put the National Liberation Party supporters in prison. State Department spokesman State Department spokesman Onret deployed the assassination of Bishop Dumas. This brutal act will not be allowed to destroy the young democracy taking hold in Chimerica. Prospect still looks bright for the first peaceful transmission of power in generations. Hey, you guys are funding me. You guys want me to win. Why do you want transition of power, man? Alright, healthcare, education, or elections. Talk about elections. Oh, screw you, man. That's not happening. We're going to go ahead and do the more U.S. aid for my campaign, I guess. Let's have some encounters. Let's talk to the IMF representative. What's she say? Oh, she wants to cut spending. Haha, yeah, right. How about this? How about, no? Miss Sourwine nods and rises to go. As you desire, Presidente, I will communicate your decision to the international financial community. I wish you success with whatever alternative responsibility you decide to pursue. Yeah, screw you, man. Presidente, congratulations. You have won by a clear majority. Seats in the National Assembly will be shared almost equally between popular stability and Christian reform. So, yeah, I'm a baller. What can I say? I won the elections. We've had a really good reign. I mean, it's not been perfect, obviously, because we had a lot of bad stuff happen. Oh, we got an interesting choice here. Should Chimerica join the movement of non-aligned nations? With some reservations, our party thinks yes. Through joint resolutions and debate, the movement will enable us to coordinate our responses to cover out common problems. We should be wary, however, of attempts to certain member countries to manipulate the movement and turn it into a propaganda forum for their points of view. What else we got? Let's see what the Internal Affairs Minister says. Some say our country should join the international organization known as the Movement of the Non-Aligned Nations. I say no. An organization that features Cuba as one of its leading members is a lot more aligned than they pretend. I see no reason, furthermore, not to firmly ally ourselves with our traditional major trade partner, the United States. You know, he's right. We cannot do that. It's stupid for us to be in the non-aligned movement. We're not getting anything from the USSR. Congratulations, said the Presidente. At the time of the insurrection, the junta set aside 3 years for firmly establishing the new government. Your leadership has been instrumental in reaching that goal. Though these years have not been easy, we look forward to continuing our efforts to make Chimerica a land of prosperity and peace. And that's the end of the game there. We'll get a review of our actions here. In the end, all segments of Chimerican society united to overthrow Farsante. 40 years of notorious corruption and repression eventually isolated him internationally as well. When the United States finally cut off all aid to the country, it was clear that the days of the dictatorship were numbered. The 3 years following Farsante's downfall saw the successful consolidation of power in the hands of Dirk Hammerfist de Alva. At the head of a broad-based junta representing each of the 3 major political alignments, with the support of the vast majority of the Chimerican populace, the new president announced the new priorities to the revolutionary government. 1 was the elimination of government corruption. 2, the development that puts first priority on the growth of the economy. And 3, improvement of the country's infrastructure, roads, utilities, and port facilities. I think we accomplished all 3 of those quite well, actually. You know, we did a great job with the economy. we're gangbusters on that. The new government therefore seemed determined to limit government to a traditional managerial role, opting not to risk economic dislocation in the pursuit of social justice. Over time, however, the new leader moderated their views and began the difficult task of steering a middle course through the turbulent waters of Chimerican political life. One of the first decisions the new government faced was what to do with the vast estates amassed by the dictator and his associates. They were quickly divided up and sold off. The redistribution policy was designed to primarily benefit the large number of owners of small-sized farms, many of whom found their holdings significantly increased, which, again, I think is probably the primary reason that our economy took off as it did. Coffee producers are the main money maker in the country, and the campesinos solved our food crisis so everyone else wasn't starving to death. That's two birds with one stone, man. An ambitious attempt to address the extreme imbalance between the rich and poor with the land reform program in the cotton-producing districts met with brutal repression. Thousands of beneficiaries lost their lives through nighttime death squad raids and daytime massacres by uniformed units of the army. Yeah, that'll be Ehrlich for you. That's the price of friggin' avoiding civil war right there. A controversial amnesty for the members of the defeated Farsante Guard led to a resurgence of death squad killings. A former Guard major named Roberto Padilla founded a paramilitary organization known as Limpia, widely blamed for the killing of labor leaders, human rights workers, and officials of opposition political parties. The Reconciliation Army represented a bold and unprecedented experiment in Latin American affairs. Two determined forces that had been shooting at each other almost until the moment Farsante left were asked to merge into one and accept the leadership of officers drawn from both sides. Colonel Horacio Ehrlich Fernandez and Subcomandante Gabriel Correa Mercado shared the office of Chief of Staff. To the surprise of no one, this situation did not last. Fighting broke out repeatedly between the two camps, culminating in Correa's forced departure into exile in Mexico. It soon became apparent that the army had managed to reassert its traditional dominance of Chimerican political life. Hammerfist, resisting advice to take more radical steps, sought to encourage smaller export producers by creating a national marketing board to offer marketing services on equal terms with those offered to their larger neighbors by transnational corporations. Again, I think very beneficial in terms of making our economy take off. The National Bank undertook to share credit resources between the producers of export crops and the producers of basic foods. This represented an historic reorientation of priorities. When mass demonstrations filled the streets in response to food shortages, the government sent in the army to break up the protests, and malnutrition was soon as bad or worse than it. That's just wrong. That's factually incorrect. We did a good job with the malnutrition. We took it down to levels that had never been seen before under Farsante, that's for sure. And honestly, I mean, we only had 17% of the population probably at our low point before it started taking off again a little bit. It was still under 25% of the population that had access to or didn't have access to foods whenever we took off price controls. But the only reason I did that is because campesinos and shopkeepers agreed it was a good idea, which means literally no one except the consumers thought it was a good idea. And you don't make economic policy based on the needs and desires of consumers. It's stupid. Okay, one of the great successes of the new government was its healthcare program. Health clinics were established throughout the country, including remote areas where no medical services had ever been available before. Through vaccination campaigns and other public health measures, an incidence of many diseases plummeted, along with the infant mortality rate. Yeah, we did pretty good there. A highly promoted adult literacy campaign proved a popular success. New schools were built throughout the country, and while funds lasted, a far greater percentage of students received basic instruction than at any point in previous time in American history. Hammerfist made considerable investment in the nation's future development through the importation of up-to-date electrical and communication systems. Most of this was earmarked for export-producing regions, already the best served in the region. Vast rural areas remained entirely without electricity, running water, or paved roads. Despite a concerted effort to attempt to reduce official corruption, scandals continued to erupt periodically. Another major break from Farsante era Union organizing was encouraged, the right to strike guaranteed, and a minimum wage enforced. Though the country continued to face this worsening economy and mounting debt, both those are wrong. I mean, debt was technically going up, but it was going up much slower than it was when Farsante was in office. The IMF and other international financial institutions did what they could to help the nation recover. So yeah, I mean, the IMF helped us. They did, sure. The fragile peace that followed the downfall of Farsante was not destined to last. National Liberation Party leaders and rural activists, disappointed with the government's policies, reformed their guerrilla bands in the mountains. When riots erupted at the campus of the National University, Army Chief of Staff Ehrlich closed it down, and the United States sharply stepped up shipments of military to aid the counter to aid sharply stepped shipments of military aid to counter the growing insurgency. The president eventually called election, as the candidate of the Christian Reform Party proved victorious. Though the process was marred by the assassination of left-wing candidates, blatant army manipulation of the process, and the overt intimidation of voters, supporters acclaimed the results for triumph of democracy. Many experts had depicted a complete collapse of the government within 3 years. Hammerfist proved them wrong. As the new leader began a fourth year in power, however, the country faced a growing number of problems, including a mounting burden of debt. So, overall, it was a good deal, you know. I mean, we came out on top. We did our job. And you know how we know that we did our job? It's because we got elected when our opponent was running around assassinating people in our party. He was assassinating the opposition in general and intimidating voters. And we still pulled through and won. And popular stability only got about half of the Congress. So that means probably about 3/4 of the government, or maybe even over that, because we get to appoint the judiciary as part of the executive, are going to be Christian reform. And on top of that, with increased health care, increased education, and increased infrastructure, as well as garnering the support of the campesinos and the coffee producers, we're going to be able to turn the tide on this whole Ehrlich BS, even though we didn't do it within our playthrough here. And the reason why is because the only people who support Ehrlich are the cotton producers. And the cotton producers are going bankrupt. They don't have any money. I mean, they're making a profit, kinda, but they've been losing money the whole game. And my policies were not aimed at helping them, because that's just a failed policy endeavor. And the coffee producers, the small and medium-sized farm owners who do that, those guys are pretty pissed at the results of the land reform attempt. So land reform didn't work out during my playthrough, but it will in the future because of those reasons. So overall, Chimerica's in a good way. They're not at odds with any superpowers. Ultimately, they did join, or no, wait, we didn't even join the non-aligned movement, because that's kind of, its own sort of alignment. And we did a good job, I think. I think we did an excellent job. The only thing I wish we could have done better is deal with Ehrlich, but again, the cost of that civil war would have been really heavy in a lot of ways. And while it would have been, kind of like a justice-oriented thing, it would have screwed our economy flat out, would have been boned, and our odds of winning it would have been low, I say, because we wouldn't have get U.S. backing, and their military would have been superior, and I mean, we might have been able to hold on, but we weren't going to stamp it out. That's the problem with the insurgencies. So, I mean, overall, great job. And I think as President Hammerfist goes into his next term, with his cabinet that he's got, things are going to work out for Chimerica. So it's good to see. Well, I had a lot of fun playing that game. It's a cool game. I won't play it again. I mean, obviously, this is not a game that you play more than once, I think. You do it once, and that's it. And if you watch it once, I don't think you even do it once, because you see all these events. Well, actually, there's probably a lot of different stuff that could have happened, especially regarding Ehrlich. At various points, I had the power to kind of get rid of him, but I didn't. So if you do that in your playthrough, I mean, I bet it's quite a bit different. So, and obviously, I didn't align with the USSR in my game. That's a possibility to do, so I didn't do that. yeah, so that's cool. Cool beans. Had a lot of fun doing it. I'm uploading this all as one massive video. It's going to be like 3.5 hours by the looks of it. And it's not going to be. Well, this game's played in DOSBox. And at the beginning, you saw me set that up. But that means that the window size is very small because DOSBox doesn't have a full screen mode. And this game, I'm recording it via Camtasia, not Fraps. So that means it's going to be very compressed looking, I guess. But it's not a visual game anyway, so that's okay. I read almost all the dialogue, I think, so that'll be good. If anyone has any games like this, even if they're older, tell me about them because I think it'd be fun to do an LP of it. I thought this was a lot of fun, and I'll be looking for games like this to do. I'm also going to be doing more LPs in general. I decided. Because I'm going to be going back to campus. I've been away for a long time. Haven't had any good internet connection, basically. I've been working off of wireless. It's going to be a pain to upload this video because I'm still not back at university. But I will be back like next week, basically. So look for more videos from me in that time. And yeah, see you guys around.